Order. Order.
On a point of order, Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this House sits in private.
Point of order, Sean Davies. The question is that this House sit in private. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the noes have it. The noes have it. The Clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Rare Cancers Bill, second reading.
Dr Scott Harper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that the bill now be read a second time. We all know someone who has suffered from a rare cancer, a brain tumour, all childhood cancers, pancreatic cancer, liver cancer and many more. It's a long list of cancers which are all, unfortunately, too familiar. While individually each of these may be considered statistically rare, collectively they are anything but. Blood Cancer UK states that rare and less common cancers account for 47% of all UK cancer diagnoses, a staggering 180,000 people per year. The irony of this bill is that the so-called rare bill's title is that so-called rare cancers are not rare. Yeah. Common cancers deserve attention, but so too do rare cancers. I want to share an example of a family in my Edinburgh South West constituency who were confronted with a rare cancer. Tilly's first symptoms began with leg pains and loss of appetite. This was in September 2021, a time when face-to-face GP consultations were not possible. After visiting A&E, she was given ibuprofen. It was thought she may have a virus. 6 weeks later, she returned to A&E and was transferred to the cancer ward, where she was diagnosed with stage 4 neuroblastoma. She was given a 50% chance of survival on diagnosis. She underwent over a dozen rounds of chemotherapy and an operation. Despite this, she sadly passed away about a year after her first symptoms appeared. Tilly was just 4 years old. Her father, Jonathan, is in the gallery today, a head teacher in my constituency. He reached out to me after reading about this bill. Jonathan explained his frustration to me that the development of new treatments for neuroblastoma, like so many other rare cancers, has been moving at a glacial pace for too long. This slow pace of change is not respected by the cancers, and it meant that Tilly missed her 7th birthday yesterday. I want to thank Jonathan for sharing Tilly's story and wish him all the best as he moves to Northern Ireland with Tilly's mum and her big sister Emily to start a new job. I also want to thank Livingston's Team Jack for their ongoing support to Tilly's family and many others. Whilst neither Jonathan nor I want to suggest that this bill would have saved Tilly, we do hope it will improve future survival rates for others beyond the 50% given to Tilly. That is why he is here today, and that is why I am here today. Madam Deputy Speaker, nobody told me that the most amazing thing about being an MP is the people we meet almost daily. People who want to make their community, our country, or even the world a better place. This is particularly true of the people I've been humbled to meet on my journey to presenting this bill here today. Cancer patients, survivors, the bereaved and campaigners. All of them want just one thing, Madam Deputy Speaker, justice. Although healthcare in the UK is founded on the notion of equality, fairness and justice, they believe that rare cancer patients are being overlooked. Their demand for justice essentially covers 3 points. First, having a rare cancer should not mean beating it is less likely than other cancers. I spoke earlier about how 47% of all UK cancer diagnoses each year can be attributed to rare and less common types. These patients already have the cards stacked against them, as they are 17% less likely to survive. This is an injustice caused by the relative lack of research development in this field over many years. Secondly, having a rare cancer should not mean you are less likely to benefit from a medical breakthrough. According to Cancers 52, in 2024, an astonishing 82% of rare and less common cancer patients were not offered a clinical trial, denying them access to potentially life-saving treatments. This is often because these trials don't even exist to start with, because there's so little progress. Or when they do exist, they're not always easy for patients to access. Let me give you an example. There is a remarkable young woman in my constituency known as Kira the Machine. Kira has been living with neuroblastoma since she was 10. She's been through it all: a prognosis of inoperability, 26 rounds of chemotherapy and 8 relapses. Her mum, Odd, her and her mum, Odd, are fundraising legends locally. I do not know a school or workplace in Edinburgh that did not help when they were given just 3 weeks to raise £500,000 for life-saving specialist treatment in the USA. Now 21 and fundraising for other cancer sufferers, Kira is an example to us all. She owes her life to a lung cancer drug not typically provided to treat neuroblastoma and not yet generally available in the UK for that purpose. Although Solving Kids Cancer is working on that, I understand. On Kira appears on my social media so much, and she's really well known in Edinburgh because of that fantastic campaign her and her mum ran. So she's a bit of a celebrity, if I can use that word, and she came into my office recently to talk about the bill, and it was really humbling to meet her. But I was also, because she has this celebrity status in my mind, I was also quite starstruck, if I could use that word, and I told her it was like Taylor Swift was entering my office. And I did have to resist the temptation to exchange friendship basics with her. But she did give me this Solving Kids Cancer badge, which I'm proud to wear today. Kira's story is important as it reminds us that the repurposing of existing drugs can unlock great benefits. But these benefits can only be delivered at scale through additional medical research efforts and through clinical trials. Unfortunately, at best, there are...
Does the honourable member give way on that point?
Very happy to, very happy to.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the NHS has a drug repurposing office, and to date, they've repurposed one drug, and that was for breast cancer. Does my honourable friend think that that is good enough?
Thank you. I welcome that intervention. I think it was a leading question. Of course it's not good enough. I don't think anybody here thinks that's good enough. And I'm sure our Minister here, who's here today agrees with that, absolutely. Unfortunately, at present, there are very few clinical trials in this country for rare cancer treatments. And families like Kira's should not need to crowdfund for treatment overseas. We should be building the capacity here in the UK. Thirdly, having a rare cancer should not mean your diagnosis is delayed when compared with other cancers. Rare cancer sufferers tell me their symptoms are often less likely to be recognised as doctors are less familiar with them.
Will my honourable friend give way?
Thank you.
Thank my honourable friend for giving way and for the powerful way he's introducing his bill this morning. My constituent Steph is just 29 years old and is a mum to 2 little girls. She was diagnosed with grade 4 glioblastoma known as astrocytoma on her birthday last year. For months prior to her diagnosis, she was treated for migraines by her GP. She knew she wasn't suffering from migraines, yet Steph was rudely dismissed by an A&E doctor and felt nobody was listening to her. Steph has since had brain surgery, radiotherapy and chemotherapy. My honourable friend knows that early diagnosis and treatment is absolutely vital. Can you assure Steph and her family today and myself that this bill will also help raise awareness across the medical profession of rare brain cancers?
Absolutely, absolutely. And last week I attended a reception from the Eve appeal, and I was really struck by the fact that the early diagnosis was a big feature of what they were talking about, and I will come on to that just in a second, actually. Consequently, there are too many people diagnosed too late. Last week, at an event hosted by the Brain Tumour Charity, I met Gabrielle and her wife and children. Gabrielle told me how, when she was initially referred to a neurologist, he did not recognise her brain tumour symptoms and told her instead to go home, breathe into a paper bag and get some counselling. If only curing brain tumours was so easy. And Reflecting back on the comment made by my honourable friend, an observation I made on this journey is when so many people have been talking about late diagnosis, and so many of those people are women, and it's purely anecdotal, but it does seem to be the case. And when I was at the Eve Appeal reception, the point was made there that so many women are turned away, and the GP tells them you're hormonal, you're premenstrual, or premenopausal.
The Honourable Member give way?
Yes.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. He's making an incredibly important point, one that many in this room across the chamber will agree with. It's particularly stark for women from BAME backgrounds, where they're more likely to be dismissed, even more so than women as well. So I thank him for making that incredibly important point.
And I thank my honourable friend and office neighbour for making that point. And that point was made by the Eve Appeal. I can't remember the statistics, but there is a stark difference, absolutely. And I did make, when I met with the Minister yesterday, I did talk about this issue with her. And she very gently pointed out to me that it's not just healthcare where women are dismissed as being hormonal, premenstrual, etc. So I thanked her for reminding me of that in the gentlest possible way. She reminded me. A cool irony is that rare cancers, like Gabrielle's tumour, are typically less survivable, making early diagnosis even more important. Rare cancer patients require early, not later, diagnosis. I've spoken about poor outcomes, lack of progress in developing treatments, and late diagnosis. My bill focuses on the first 2 points, but I did want to acknowledge the need to improve diagnosis because of the reflections that have already been made, and I'm sure that will feature in the cancer plan as it comes forward. Madam Deputy Speaker, I will be the first to admit that when I was successful in the ballot for a private member's bill, I found it daunting as a new MP. I thought I had some really good ideas for a private member's bill, but as soon as my ping-pong ball was picked from the goldfish bowl, I was inundated with calls from constituents, charities and lobbyists, each telling me that their cause was better than any I could think of. I considered many worthwhile causes over the following days, but while having a coffee in Collington Mains Tesco in Edinburgh South West, I received emails from members of the public supporting a campaign by my honourable friend, the member for Mitcham in Morden. I actually met one of those people who emailed me just last week, Brianna, and it was incredibly moving to meet her actually, because it took me right back to the start of this journey. And I posted on my Facebook page about meeting her, and straight away somebody knew her and said that Brianna had helped them as well when their family had encountered glioblastoma. And it's a reminder that so many people affected by these conditions turn their loss into something really positive and help other people. So the member for Mitcham and Morden's campaign related to glioblastoma, a type of tumour which took my father-in-law. At that moment, it felt like the stars had aligned for me, and I really do mean that. I really did get that feeling. And I do want to pay tribute to the member for Mitcham and Morden. Yeah. I know her. More. I know her to be a formidable woman who, in this context, is driven by glioblastoma, taking her sister Margaret. I didn't know her sister Margaret at all, and that's to my loss. But I do know that she shaped my party. She helped change our country for the better. And I know that above all else, she was loved by her sister. And glioblastoma is typical of so many rare cancers. And it started me on this journey, so I do want to talk about it further. My father-in-law, Ivor Hutchison, was a dignified man, but that was something glioblastoma did not respect. He was a technical teacher at Belbaxter High School in Fife. He was married to Sylvia, and they had 4 daughters, Denise, Iona, my lovely wife Audrey, who's in the gallery, and Sarah. I've just embarrassed her, I think. In time, they had grandchildren, Andrew, our daughter Ruth, Hannah, Matthew, our son Ben, Rory and Sophie. Ivor was not a passive grandfather. He worked hard to ensure his grandchildren flourished. In September 2017, Ivor began having problems with his speech. My wife Audrey, an NHS nurse, was concerned it might be a sign of dementia. We all hoped that was not the case. Following an MRI scan in November, we received the devastating news that Ivor had glioblastoma. At Christmas, he was still very much himself and enjoying the festivities. Ivor never had a pound of fat on him, really, but when it came to Christmas time, he really did hoover up the food, and he enjoyed the Christmas meals, so it was great to see him that Christmas. But we did have a feeling it would be his last. Once we entered the new year, he began to lose his mobility, and eventually he was admitted into Adamson Hospital in Cooper. In 2018, surrounded by his wife and daughters, Ivor died peacefully, 8 months after his first symptoms. He had a good life, and his daughters are a fantastic legacy to him, as well as all the pupils he taught at school. But as a physically fit man, he should have lived longer. He should have lived to see his birthday last weekend, and if he had done so, he wouldn't have missed 2 of his grandchildren getting married, and his first great-grandchild, Freya, being born in December last year. I assumed that he had been unlucky with glioblastoma, but it was not until I met the member from Mitcham and Morden and I learned that only 25% of glioblastoma patients live beyond 12 months after diagnosis, and only 1 in 20 survive beyond 5 years. Despite this awful prognosis, like other rare cancers, the drugs to treat it have not changed in decades. This is why I knew in my heart I needed to introduce a bill that would help equip those working hard to fight against glioblastoma and other rare cancers with the tools they need to further their efforts and ultimately save lives. Over the last 15 years, Madam Deputy Speaker, thanks to the dedicated work of charities and survivors and researchers, we have seen a 10% rise in survival rates for those diagnosed with cancer. Globally, new treatments are being developed and rolled out to patients, improving outcomes and saving lives in our NHS every single day. However, Madam Deputy Speaker, rare cancer patients are being left behind, and I need to explain why. This is not due to a lack of effort by charities or those affected by the disease. In fact, in the gallery today are members of some incredible charities who are fighting against rare cancers, an often uphill battle. I want to thank them for their hard work in helping me develop this bill, and they really have helped me develop this bill, which aims to address the injustices faced by rare cancer patients and their families. And what I'd say about all the people who I've met from those charities is it's much more than a job for them. This is about really making a difference to people's lives and improving survivability and supporting families. The reason for this uphill battle, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that research into rare cancers is much less appealing to pharmaceutical companies when compared to more common conditions. With smaller patient populations, there is an increased logistical challenge in bringing patients together. Currently, we are lacking a sufficient development strategy, and there is no single source of patient data, meaning companies must undertake the costly endeavour of finding patients and verifying eligibility. Even if they succeed in running a clinical trial and a drug proves to be an effective treatment, companies then face the challenge of selling a drug developed at great expense to a small market. Ultimately, these companies exist to return a profit for their shareholders. When given a choice between investing in a potential treatment for rare cancer or a more common one, too often rare cancer patients lose out. Madam Deputy Speaker, having set out the challenges faced by those diagnosed with rare cancers, let me now address what this bill aims to accomplish. I wish to list 4 key measures and explain their impact. I'll list them and then go on to describe them. Number 1, appoint a named responsible lead for delivery of rare cancer research. 2, create a single registry of rare cancer trials. 3, create a single registry of rare cancer patients available for trials. 4, build the founding evidence base for repurposing new cancer treatments. Let me explain why these are important in turn. First, the bill will place a duty on the Secretary of State to facilitate and promote research related to rare cancer patients. The appointment of a national speciality lead for rare cancers in the National Institute of Health and Care Research, known as NHR, would provide the Secretary of State with advice on the design and planning of research to facilitate collaboration between relevant parties. This will ensure coordination and accountability for the delivery of new cancer research in the UK. Second, to increase the access to clinical trials via a service tailored for rare cancer patients. Through the Secretary of State's new duties, this would be accomplished as part of the existing B Part of Research Registry, ensuring all trials are registered in a single place. Thirdly, charities and clinicians tell me more trials would be attracted to the UK if they had easier access to patient cohorts. Establishing a single database of willing patients would remove a significant burden on researchers in finding and verifying eligible people for clinical trials. Very welcome.
But I congratulate him on bringing forward this bill and this important subject. He's talking about research. His bill actually in clauses 2 and 3 limits the application of his bill to England and Wales. Can he explain why that is and what is happening in relation to these research issues in Scotland?
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his intervention. The challenge is devolution. I'm a huge fan of devolution, but I do think that often the UK is at its best when it works together, particularly on healthcare. Yeah. So I do hope that in time we will see progress and the nations will work together. And there has been, and I don't want to overstate this, there has been discussions across the UK about how we could work together on this. So watch the space is perhaps the answer. Fourth, to trigger a review by the government of the orphan drug regulations, examining how they can be reformed to better incentivise pharmaceutical companies to invest in clinical trials for rare cancers. Specifically, this will consider how incentives could be provided to pharmaceutical companies to trial the repurposing of new cancer treatments. We often hear about how drug development for one cancer can be used to defeat another. Remember, that is what Kira relies on right now. My bill aims to build the foundation to industrialise this approach via incentives. The EU has a similar system for incentivising the testing of drugs for paediatric use, which have already been approved for use for adults. So this approach has been tried and tested. Together, Madam Deputy Speaker, these measures will ensure we have the leadership in government and will remove barriers faced by researchers and pharmaceutical companies to run new trials in the UK. Would you give way on that point? Very happy to.
I thank the honourable member for the really powerful ways introducing this bill. Would he recognise some of those pioneering teams, like the one at Charing Cross Hospital under my Imperial College Trust, where Professor Michael Seckel is leading the way in groundbreaking treatment and research for gestational trophoblastic disease and germ cell tumours? And does he agree that those centres need support to expand and share the research findings that they are bringing to the rest of the NHS?
Absolutely, and I think there's fantastic expertise in our universities right across the UK. And as I say that, I have to refer members to my register of interest because my connections with the university sector. But there's much more we can do to attract the best researchers to the UK and build capacity within UK universities. Absolutely. So these measures will provide greater accountability for the delivery of new research. And Madam Deputy Speaker, please don't just take my word for it. Brain tumour research described the bill as essential for a brain tumour cure. I didn't feel any pressure at all when I read that quote, to be honest. It was quite daunting. The Less Survivable Cancer Task Force say the bill could be a truly transformative moment in the UK's approach to research for rare and less common cancers. And my friends at the Brain Tumour Charity said the Rare Cancers Bill is a framework for tangible and impactful change. At this point, I have to mention my daughter's connection with the Brain Tumour Charity. She's running a marathon in May to raise funding for them, and I wish her well for that. Thank you. The bill is also supported by the following. I'm going to list some of the groups that are supporting the bill today. Pancreatic Cancer UK, who have been absolutely fantastic in their support for what we've been doing. Absolutely fantastic. Cancer 52, that's an organisation of over 100 groups they represent. The Angel Mums, Grace Kelly Childhood Cancer Trust, Inflammatory Breast Cancer Network in the UK. Inflammatory breast cancer accounts for 2% of breast cancer diagnoses in the UK each year, but 10% of deaths. Target Ovarian Cancer, Brain Trust, this is a difficult one, the Cholangiocarcinoma Charity, AMMF, the Urology Foundation, Tessia Jowl Brain Cancer Mission, Action Kidney Research, Sarcoma UK, I met them this week. A friend had that cancer, and the fantastic organisation. I hope to work with them more in the future. Maggie's, Shine Cancer Support, Solving Kids Cancer, British Liver Trust, Blood Cancer UK, Radiotherapy UK, Leukemia UK, CCLG, the Children's Cancer and Leukemia Group, CLL Support, Neuroblastoma UK, Salivary Gland Cancer UK, Neuroendocrine Cancer UK, Melanoma Focus, Myeloma UK, Hope for Tomorrow, Alike, Yorkshire Cancer Research, Young Lives vs Cancer, Tessa Gill Foundation, the UK Mastocytosis Support Group, Bone Cancer Research Trust, the Neurosciences Foundation and the Eve Appeal. And I'll say again, they had a fantastic reception last week, and when I went along to that, having their support, it felt like a real tipping point in the progress we're making in building support for this bill. And it was great to see the Minister there as well. And I also have to say, and this is not a trivial point, the cake there was absolutely fantastic. And I don't doubt, when I check my emails when I get back from office, there'll be more organisations getting in touch saying they want to support what we're doing today. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I know many members in the Chamber today will have deeply personal stories to tell on their own behalf and on the behalf of their constituents. And I look forward to hearing those testimonies as we debate this bill, because I think that is so important to give those people a voice. I will conclude thereby by saying that this Madam Deputy Speaker, the bill we are debating today has a real chance of making a difference. For too long, rare cancer patients have been left on the sidelines without significant advancement. This cannot go on. Tilly and Ivor deserved a better chance of beating the cancer inside them, and those yet to be diagnosed deserve a better chance of a full life. Let us pass this bill today and work across the UK to take the fight to rare cancers and save lives. Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
Yeah. The question is that the bill be now read a second time, and before I call the first speaker, I am aware that this is a very personal debate for some members, so please feel free to leave the chamber if you need to. Let's look after each other today. I call Mike Wood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to start by congratulating the honourable gentleman, firstly on his fortune in being drawn in the private member's bill ballot, but then also on his wisdom for picking up this very important issue to take forward, having been similarly lucky in being drawn from the private member's bill ballot myself a few weeks after I was first elected nearly a decade ago. I know quite the barrage of calls and emails that suddenly come away, the very sudden and slightly fleeting popularity that comes from coming out towards the top of the ballot, and the very, very many very worthy causes, campaigns that come your way to choose between. So the honourable gentleman couldn't have picked a better one than the bill that is published in his name today. And if perhaps he is never quite as popular as he was in the few hours after the publication of the private member's bill ballot, I know that he would willingly exchange all of that popularity in an instant for the difference that this legislation can make to so many lives across the country if and when we hope it is passed and implemented. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I stand today not just as a member of this House, but as a friend, as someone who's deeply moved by the pain of seeing someone I care about, someone who has become like family, struggle against an insidious disease. Because this bill is not just another piece of legislation, it's a cry for help. It's a plea for those who are fighting for their lives, a lifeline for families who are watching their loved ones slip away bit by bit, day after day. Because too often, those diagnosed with rare cancers are left stranded in a system that really doesn't have the answers they need. We know the wonders that pharmaceutical companies can do in drug development, but the horrible truth is that few people going to be able to or willing to invest the enormous amounts of money taking forward drug development, knowing that I think it's about 1 in 25,000 drug candidates ever make it to market for conditions that perhaps will require that drug at most 1,000 or 2,000 times a year, of course.
Thank him for giving way and say, would he consider that there is a whole range of new modern immunotherapy drugs which could be used on these cancers that already exist and are used to treat other people but are simply not tried? And the cost of those trials is not overwhelming, and we can do them, and the NHS repurposing project should be doing them.
The Honourable Lady is obviously absolutely right, and I know that she approaches this subject with tragically a huge amount of personal experience. We've seen already, and in some cases long-marketed drugs being applied for new purposes and for new conditions, but without those costly clinical trials, they will not be licensed, they will not be approved for prescription, and that's why this bill is so important, because clinical trials sadly are currently a distant hope for far too many, and many patients really are left with the crushing, gut-wrenching words, there's nothing more we can do. And those words can be a death sentence, but they don't have to be, not if we act. And I want to tell you about, and many of you, the members of this House and House staff will know my senior parliamentary assistant and dear friend, Dan Horrocks. I mean, Dan is perhaps best known to many people as the owner of Bella, his therapy Shih Tzu, who he had whilst he was being treated for his third brain tumour, and who is often seen roaming around the palace and 1 Parliament Street. Now, Dan's worked for me since I was first elected in 2015, but he isn't just my senior parliamentary assistant. He's someone who's become like family. He's a father, a husband, and a full-time cancer survivor. For 14 years, he has fought this monster, each time feeling the ground slip more from under him, as his options narrow, leaving him and his family with ever-reducing hope. And we've seen him face unimaginable pain. I watched him endure brain surgeries, radiotherapy, the fear in his eyes each time the disease comes back. And he hears his doctors tell him they don't know how much more his body can take, whether he can be put through that next course of radiotherapy. Now, Dan's journey started with something as simple as headaches, as the Honourable Gentleman was referring to in another case. Now, headaches that no one thought were serious at the time as a teenager. Now, 3 GPs all misdiagnosed that tumour. And for unknown reasons, the GPs didn't want to send Dan for a scan. A simple scan to check that there were no malign causes would have identified those tumours months earlier. It was a free voucher for an eye test that saved Dan's life, because it wasn't until, by sheer luck, an optician noticed something wrong in his eyes that anyone realised the nightmare he was living. And so that optician literally saved his life. But what followed has been nothing short of a nightmare. Brain tumours, surgeries, radiotherapy. The heart-wrenching hope that every treatment might be the last, only for the disease to rear its ugly head again. And now the cancer has spread to his spine. His doctors and consultants have no answers. His options are dwindling. And yet Dan's fight is far from over, because Dan isn't just fighting for himself, he's fighting for his 2-year-old son, Elijah, who deserves to grow up with his father by his side, cheering him on at his first football match, guiding him through life's milestones. Dan dreams of walking his son to school every day, of being there for every moment that really matters, whether it's his graduation or his wedding, the moments that every parent should have the chance to see. And he's fighting with his wife, Sonia, who has been his rock to all of us. Sonia, who has stayed by his side through every hospital visit, through every sleepless night, through every moment of doubt and fear. Together they've dreamed of a life growing old together, of watching their child grow up, of building memories that will last forever. But that future is slipping away. And that is why we're here today, to make sure that no parent, no family, no child has to face the horror of rare cancer without hope. This bill is not just about changing laws or regulations. It's about giving families like Dan's a fighting chance. It mandates a review of the orphan drug regulations to ensure that rare cancers get the investment they so desperately need. It creates the National Speciality Lead to drive research and innovation. It establishes a registry service to help connect patients to the clinical trials that really could save their lives. So this bill gives hope, a real chance for families who are facing the unimaginable. And so I stand here today with a heart full of hope, but also with a heavy heart, because I know the time is not on their side. Dan doesn't have the luxury of waiting. His family doesn't have the luxury of waiting. No one diagnosed with rare cancer has that luxury. And so this is why this bill is so very, very urgent. We spend a lot of time in this place talking about politics, but this is not about politics. This is about real people like Dan who desperately need our help. Because cancer doesn't care about politics. It doesn't care about what background you come from, your age, your gender, or what party you belong to. It strikes indiscriminately. It takes what it wants, and it leaves devastation in its wake. That is why we must respond with urgency, with compassion, but most importantly, with action. And so I strongly support this bill, and I urge all members here today, please stand with us. Stand with families who are clinging to the hope that there is something more we can do. Stand with those like Dan who are fighting for more time, for more moments, for more chances to hold their loved ones close. Because the cost of inaction is not just measured in money. It's measured in precious lives lost. Let's pass this bill. Let's give people like Dan and his family the hope they so desperately need. Let's give them a future that is still within reach.
I call Josh Fenton Glean.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise today to speak about a bill that will increase research funding, focus on the development of more effective treatments for rarer forms of cancer. I thank the member for Edinburgh South West for bringing this bill today. But like many in this House, I rise because I've lost a family member to a rare cancer, and I also rise as a member of the Health and Social Care Select Committee. In the last Parliament, the Health and Social Care Select Committee conducted the Future Cancer Inquiry, which recommended, and I quote, that the UK should be leading on driving up international action to tackle the poor outcomes for the least survivable and least common cancers. This bill will do that. But as I say, my reason for speaking today is much more personal than that. On January the 20th this year, my brother Alex English passed away from high-grade actinic cell carcinoma, a form of salivary gland cancer, and I tell this story to highlight what we can win. Because this bill can gift families with more time with the special people that they love. Increasingly more common cancers are treatable, or they're illnesses people can live with. But for rare cancers, we still have a way to go. And without focus, we won't get any further. There are over 700 diagnoses of various forms of salivary gland cancer each year. But my search of Hansard for related terms only finds 2 mentions in this chamber in the past 30 years. The member for Edinburgh South West will have given it the 3rd. One of those mentions was me following the death of my brother. And that's why we need more focus. In their evidence to that Select Committee inquiry, Cancer 52 noted that while 47% of diagnoses are of less common cancers, rare cancers account for 55% of deaths. Members across this house have our own cancer journeys, either ourselves or friends or loved ones. And I want to talk about my brother's journey. And not all cancer journeys have the outcome that we want. And even with this bill, we're still going to lose some people. But what more investment into research for rare cancers can give us is crucial. It can give us time. And I'd do anything for more time with my brother. If you'll indulge me, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to talk for a minute about the person who Alex was. Because the most important thing about Alex wasn't just how he died, it was how he lived and the mark he left on the world. He fit a lot into 53 years. A lot of us think that our older siblings are rock stars, but in my brother's case, that was literally true. The band he joined at university called Pure toured with bands like Soundgarden, and they reached the top 10 in Japan. I've always been tremendously proud to call him my brother. I was proud of the horse-drawn narrowboat company he ran in Hebden Bridge, which formed part of many people's happy childhood memories. And his subsequent time at the National Trust, helping properties to become profitable, working to restore nature and working with local authorities. His last major project was creating woodlands near Lunt in Liverpool. But most of all, I was proud of the person he was. He was always funny, he had a surreal wit. He was unfailingly kind, and that sort of toxic, non-toxic model of masculinity that the world needs more of. I remember the humour and love in the best man speech he gave for me. And I'll never not be sorry that I've written eulogies for my brother, but never a best man speech. While preparing for Christmas in 2023, I got a call from Alex and he asked if I had a minute to talk, which is unlike him because he wouldn't generally be over serious. He said he had a lump on the side of his face that was, in his words, unsightly but not overly concerning. It might be cancer, but there were a number of other things that it could have been. And if it was cancer, it was likely a very treatable form. He instructed me to be aware of it but not make a big deal of it because typically he didn't want to worry our mum. Later it transpired it was a cynic cell carcinoma, but the prognosis was good. They were going to operate, and the cancer continued to grow. His operation took 14 hours. The thing about Alex's tumour is that the version of the illness he had was high grade, which meant that it mutated faster. It's something that's only been identified in about 100 cases. Something that no doubt could have been identified earlier had we known more about cancers like his. Last spring in my mum's garden, during a hushed conversation with a different family member to the side, they told me that Alex might only have 18 months to live. I hugged my 2-year-old son who was playing in the garden unaware because I was trying not to make a big deal of it, but sometimes you need to hug someone. And every update got worse, until I took a day off during the election campaign to visit him at the Christie Hospital because his lung had collapsed. But then, because it's never a straight line, his health improved. He got to sit up there in the gallery to watch my maiden speech in Parliament. We went to a Pixies concert together at the Peace Hall in Halifax. Then it got worse, Madam Deputy Speaker. On Christmas Eve last year, he was hospitalised again. And when he returned home, we knew he was coming home to die. I can't say enough about his wonderful friends, particularly Matt and Sarah, and my incredible family who cared for him at the end. And all of us would have spent more time at his bedside if we could. Because time with people you love is a privilege. And that's what this bill is about. Giving people more time with those they love. Perhaps even a full lifetime together. And in the cases where the cancer is worse and it can't be treated or cured, it's about giving more time, better health, and an understanding of the journey that people are on. More special moments, be they a Pixies concert, reading a story to a child, Alex read the best stories, and time to organise what you leave behind. People who develop cancers that are rare still matter. They still deserve more time. The work to help people like Alex in the future must start today. This government has a renewed emphasis on tackling rare cancers, both in memory of the sister for the Honourable Member for Mitcham and Morden, for Tessa Jowl, and for countless other campaigners, including those in the gallery today. But what we need is focus. We need determination to respond quickly. I thank this House for indulging me today. Let's be that world leader in tackling rare cancers that's so desperately needed. Let's give families special time with those that they love the most. And let's pass this bill today.
I call Monica Harding. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to thank the Honourable Member for Edinburgh South West for bringing this legislation before the House today, and I pay tribute to him and the Honourable Members who have already spoken so movingly on this subject, and for the speech that went before me, and to the Member for Mitcham and Morden for her tireless advocacy. The many forms of cancer categorised as rare, according to this bill, might each strike a small number of people, but taken together, rare cancers make up almost 1 in 5 of all cancer diagnoses. And each incident, each diagnosis, each prognosis has the same devastating impact on families throughout this country, my own being no exception. My brother-in-law, Group Captain Pip Harding, who is 53, was diagnosed with stage 4 glioblastoma this time last year. At the time, he was serving in the Royal Air Force with the US Indo-Pacific Command, one of his many tours including Afghanistan and Iraq, and was given 9 to 12 months to live. For his wife Claire and for his 5 children, the news changed everything. In September, I joined Pip, his family, and over 400 other loved ones at RAF Benson in Oxfordshire for what was called a dining out or farewell ceremony, an event to allow everyone to be together with Pip, potentially for one last time. You can imagine how difficult, but yet how moving that was. A few weeks later, Pip was lucky enough to come across a pioneering brain surgeon, Dr. Paul Mulholland, who has been trialling a treatment called oncothermia. This employs radio frequencies to target and heat malignant cancer tumour cells while avoiding healthy cells. Oncothermia is not currently available on the NHS, and each 1-hour treatment costs £1,000. A tumour like Pip's requires 36 sessions. For most people, indeed for almost all of us, that kind of money and consequently that course of care is out of reach. But the 400 friends and family who attended Pip's farewell dinner set up a GoFundMe page, which is now covering the costs of the treatment. We love Pip, which is why we all put as much as we could in to fund it. But cancers like this, the brutal and bleak prognosis, brings people together to fight it, and I want the government to share that result. Since starting these monthly oncothermia sessions in December, the first MRI scan showed Pip's brain tumour has reduced in size from 7 centimetres to 1.7 centimetres. Pip is, thank God, still alive and watching today. And European studies are now suggesting that oncothermia can extend life for 4 to 5 years. For Pip's 5 children, that time is everything. But this is not the whole of my experience with glioblastoma. In 2021, my husband John's best friend Ian died from the disease. His widow, Nicola, is in the gallery right now. And almost unbelievably, Nicola's sister Karen, who had done so much helping Nicola through the loss of Ian, was herself diagnosed with stage 4 glioblastoma last year and died a few months later. And I know that others in this chamber and in the gallery have had their lives touched by glioblastoma too. And I am sure that they will agree that in the past 3 decades there has been an unacceptable lack of progress made on this disease, a lack of progress on developing new treatments, on making them widely accessible, and on keeping those diagnosed with glioblastoma here with their loved ones. In the past 50 years, cancer survival rates in the UK have doubled, whereas in the 1970s, only 25% of those diagnosed were expected to live 10 years, today over half do. This is a record of staggering success and represents countless lives extended and richer and fuller and even saved. But when it comes to glioblastoma, however, as we have heard, there is far less to celebrate. The chances of living a decade with the disease are 1 in 100. The gains in life expectancy over recent decades can be measured in months. Precious, yes, but not enough. Not nearly enough. Madam Deputy Speaker, glioblastoma is a rare cancer, but it is also an exceptionally lethal one. Brain tumours are the biggest cancer killer of children and of adults under the age of 40, yet in recent years glioblastomas has been apportioned only around 1 to 2% of UK cancer funding. And in 2018, to honour Dame Chester Jow, the government announced a doubling of funding for research into brain tumours. 6 years later, it was widely reported that less than half of the pledged £40 million had actually been spent. During each one of these years, as funding was delayed and sluggishly deployed, over 3,000 people in the UK were diagnosed with glioblastomas. So would the government now update the House on how the remaining funds have been spent and are being spent? And will the Minister assure me that as the National Cancer Plan is developed, alongside the NHS 10-year plan, there will be a deliberate and specific consideration given to glioblastomas? Madam Deputy Speaker, the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Authority works to incentivise research into orphan drugs, granting exclusivity for manufacturers and making it cheaper to bring drugs to market once they are developed. But clearly, when it comes to glioblastomas, they have not adequately succeeded.
On that point,
I will give...
Would the member give way? I have been to see the MHRSA numerous times, and I've asked them about repurposed drugs. Many pharmaceutical companies are worried about the repurposing of drugs in case that the research on glioblastoma affects the main cause for their having the drug and therefore makes it less successful. We have beseeched them to treat glioblastoma separately. Would she support such a move?
Thank the honourable member for her intervention, and I would of course support this move, and I urge the government to listen and take action on this. So when it comes to glioblastomas, getting this right is vital. I want to stress that despite minor breakthroughs, exciting innovations and apparently promising research leads, this disease has simply not seen the improvements in survival rates that most cancers have. To put it bluntly, glioblastoma remains a death sentence. And an increasingly common one. In the UK, cancer diagnoses have increased, and despite some worrying sub-themes, however, this trend is largely due to increased life expectancy, but this is not so with glioblastoma. In the past 30 years, rates in the UK have more than doubled, far beyond the uptick attributable to us all living longer. More people are developing this disease, and yet we have failed to make meaningful strides when it comes to treatment, cures, even when it comes to giving those with glioblastoma a little more time with those dearest to them. Now is the moment to do something about it. So I welcome today's legislation, and I welcome its emphasis on improving research. And I have already touched on drug development, but I also welcome provisions to facilitate clinical trials. Because the grim reality is that for glioblastoma, these trials are hard to conduct, there are too few patients, and frequently their life expectancies are too limited. Anything that can be done to accelerate the process by which eligible patients are connected with researchers faster and with less friction is valuable, and I'm glad to see it. I want to emphasise also that there are great opportunities in front of us to accelerate research and to make broad advances in the battle against rare cancers. Along with almost half of my parliamentary colleagues, I'm proud to have pledged my support for the Lobular Moonshot project, which advocates a boost of around £20 million over 5 years for research into the basic biology of invasive lobular breast cancer with a view to developing new treatments. Now, lobular breast cancer, despite being the second most common form of breast cancer, is treated in many ways like a rare cancer. It is under-researched, difficult to diagnose through the standard screening mammogram, and often presents fewer symptoms than invasive ductal carcinoma, which makes... I will give way.
As she's explaining very well, invasive lobular breast cancer is not classed as a rare cancer, and I am concerned that it wouldn't fall under this bill. So I would gently ask in the next stage if it could be widened, because I think, as she's explaining well, it has many characteristics of a rare cancer.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. Yes, it's treated in many ways like a rare disease, but it is under research, difficult to diagnose through the standard screening mammogram, and often presents fewer symptoms than invasive ductal carcinoma, which makes it the overwhelming majority of breast cancer incidents. I recently met with my constituent named Kate, who was diagnosed with lobular breast cancer in 2023. She explained to me that because almost all breast cancer research is based on the ductal variant, women like her are diagnosed later and often receive treatment oriented towards a cancer with a different biology to lobular cancer, two factors which result in high rates of recurrence and lower survival rates. So Kate has been in remission for more than a year now, and since then has been an advocate to research. So on behalf of Kate, I want to ask the Minister, has she met with the lobular moonshot campaigners, and is the government taking steps to increase research into the cancer? And what consideration has she given to updating NICE guidelines to encourage the use of MRIs to earlier diagnose lobular breast cancer? I think that the idea of the moonshot is the right one. In fighting cancer, we should set ambitious goals and we should innovate until we meet them. Moreover, as with the Apollo project, research into seemingly narrow things often has spillover effects, producing vast, unanticipated benefits, and this is often true with orphan drugs. To take just one example, Gleevec hasn't just changed the game for one rare form of leukemia, it is now used to treat a range of other cancers and conditions. The British pharmaceutical development sector is exceptionally strong and now is a moment of potential. On genome mapping, on AI, on biotech, on immunotherapy and cancer vaccines, the UK is in a position to transform lives and to save them. Of course, I recognise the limited scope of this bill, but I nonetheless believe it to be vital. This House must take a keen interest in accelerating and incentivising research into rare cancers, including glioblastomas, and this legislation meaningfully advances that goal. I just want to speak very briefly about young people and children, and about a lovely girl called Maddie Cowie. Aged 18, Maddie was diagnosed with alveolar soft part sarcoma. She had just started university. A sarcoma is an uncommon cancer that can occur anywhere in the body. All cancers in someone of Maddie's age are considered to be rare, but in Maddie's case, the classification was ultra rare, and partly in consequence, it took 5 months for her to receive a diagnosis. And Maddie, remember, had just started university at the time and recalled, "It felt like my life was falling apart. In many ways it was, and it did. It was a very lonely place." Maddie's diagnosis was almost 10 years ago now, and there are no approved treatments for Maddie's type of rare cancer, and she is currently undergoing a clinical trial. It is likely that she will remain on treatment for life. Maddie is amazing. She is brave, and she will not let cancer define her, but I want to bring her up because cancer in young people is so uncommon, it is often diagnosed later. Neither medical professionals nor young people expect it, but we know that the later a diagnosis comes, the more likely it is to be lethal. Will the Minister therefore share with the House what steps the government is taking to ensure that the rare cancers afflicting young people are caught earlier? And then finally, I'm reminded something Emily Dickinson once wrote about hope. She wrote, "I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea." We must get this right. We must give sufferers hope. We owe it to Pip's family, to Claire, his wife, and his 5 children, and to Nicola in the gallery, and to her and Ian's sons, Adam and Oliver, and to so many others who have suffered and who are here with us today. I believe we can.
I call Dame Siobhan McDonough.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to start through you to apologise to the young black man on the tube from the Northern Line from Collier's Wood this morning for having to spend his journey looking at me, sobbing my heart out. It must have been a very odd experience, and I wanted to say to him, I'm not just sad, I am angry. I am angry at the NHS, I am angry at the MHRSA, I am angry beyond belief at the NIHR, the National Institute for Health Research. It should be renamed. as the National Institute for something that doesn't do very much at great public expense. All these institutions are bedevilled by wanting to carry on doing what they have always done. It does not get them sacked. As the former Home Secretary, Lord John Reid, constantly tells me, Siobhan, nobody ever got sacked for continuing to do the same thing. You are only sacked if you do something different. And my God has this morning not told us that we need to be doing something different. We have the tools to do something different, but the people in positions of power and responsibility choose not to. We have the best health system in the world for potential drug trials. A uniform system, well-trained doctors, great scientists, great universities, and great hospitals. But do we do it? No. Do we fail people every single day? Yes. Do we threaten those doctors who try to do something different? Let me tell you, those groundbreaking oncologists are looking over their shoulder to wait for the regulator to come and get them when one of their colleagues grasses them up. That is the atmosphere that we currently have in our intellectual and health services institutions in this country. I can feel sorry for myself and for my loss, but I don't want that. I want that things to change. And I believe that all of us from all parties need to run fast and break things and provide a challenge to those people who are currently running our systems. Why is it that with the most universal health system in the world, with a repurposing drug project, that we are not repurposing drugs for people with rare cancers? Why are they not doing it for glioblastoma? Why is it that in May we will open a drug trial at UCL and UCLH in Margaret's memory to trial one such drug that has been in the system for years? Why is it that we organised a dinner with the former Prime Minister Tony Blair, that people ran marathons and sold cakes and sold scones in beautiful Cornwall villages? It gave us a great deal to do those things. But why is it that our system means that we have to do it? Why is it that the trial we're going to open under the amazing Paul Mulholland in May is only based in one trust? It's only based in one trust because if we started to negotiate with all other hospital trusts who are experts in this field, it would take us 2 years to get started. Why is it that we are outstripped by Israel, by Spain, by America, by any number of countries because we can't get our act together to start a trial, because each hospital trust is arguing to renegotiate every trial and every plan. And this is not new. It was raised by Lord O'Shaughnessy in his great report on clinical trials, which is now 2 years old. And we have made no progress. We have made no progress under the former government, and we have made no progress under our government. The 40 million given to the NIHR in 2017 for glioblastoma and brain cancer drug trials has not been spent. Can any member of this House explain to me how that is humanly possible? Do we not have the drugs that we could trial? Yes, of course we do. Trials aren't that complicated. We can do them if we choose to. We have the doctors to do them. but we just have to want to actually go and change them. I want to apologise to my honourable friend on the front bench when she came to talk to me in the tea room this morning. She got this at very fast pace. But I have met now 4 wonderful cancer ministers, 2 from the Conservative side, 2 from the Labour side, all dedicated, all wanting to sort this out. But you can't do this by edict, by hoping, by wishing, unless you change things, and I dare say unless you remove some people, it is never, ever going to happen. All the institutions continue to exist because they don't do things differently. If you are diagnosed with a glioblastoma, you will get the same treatment that you would have got 25 years ago. You will have your tumour removed. When you have your tumour removed, you will be delighted it's gone. Only it's not gone, it's coming back. You will be given 8 weeks radiotherapy. It's brutal. It will help you for a while, but it will come back. Then you get given chemotherapy, which was temozolomide is the drug. It was approved at the beginning of the 2000s. It will help, but it's coming back. But you have to be able to withstand that drug yourself. Margaret couldn't do that. By March, 5 months into her being diagnosed, she couldn't take it, her kidneys collapsed. And what happens then? If you've got the money, and we had the money and we had good friends, and at this point I would just like to publicly thank Lord Wahid Ali for the kindness and the friendship he showed us throughout Margaret's journey, and the treatment he's experienced from the press is absolutely appalling. He helped us on our way. But if you are somebody with no money and you can't fundraise, your life ends at the chemotherapy. If you're lucky enough to have the money because there's nothing on the NHS, then you find a way. And I am really grateful that the honourable member from Isha and Walton, that her brother-in-law is on the oncotherapy machine. My sister fundraised from that machine because we had to go to Dusseldorf to have it. And so we brought it here. So it's great that he's receiving much benefit from it, and I know that many other people are too. But why is it that the NHS, so risk-averse that they will not allow slightly alternative therapies for rare cancers, is happy that people who are really ill get on a plane and go to a different country? Is it because they don't see the other country? It's okay. You know, I've told the stories of holding my sister's head as she was sick in a bucket on Terminal 5 Heathrow Airport, of carrying her onto a plane in an effort to hope that the air stewardess would not see how she was, of lying next to her over the night, hoping that she would be alive in the morning, because what was I going to do in a hotel in Germany, in a country where I couldn't speak the language? That's my experience, but I'm only one of thousands and thousands and thousands of people, including children, who do this every year, because our system will not allow the use of novel treatments. Why? Why is it that we can't change things? Why is it that we don't get up every single day and want to cure something? I don't know about other honourable members, but when I joined the Labour Party, when I became an MP in '97, every day I get up and hope that we can make things better in some way. I don't understand why our systems don't want to do the same thing, and I want to understand, but it is beyond me. If there are drugs there that could possibly cure or give longer life to people with glioblastoma, why don't we trial them? It's not beyond our ability. We have the money to do it. We'll raise the money to do it if we don't. We just need the opportunity. And I don't know why we don't have that wish to achieve. And I hope that perhaps, I was given some hope yesterday at the proposed abolition of NHS England, because something needs to change. I don't know whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing, but we need to liberate people to do things. And let's face it, in the end, the only thing that changes things are people who are well motivated, who are willing to take a risk. Beyond that, people will continue to die, will continue to have to go to other countries, will continue to have to spend large amounts of money, and people not lucky enough to be in that position will just simply die prematurely. I want to thank my honourable friend for introducing this bill. I want to thank him for the courtesy he has always shown me, which must have at times been difficult, as I sat shouting at him in Portcullis House about how everything was useless and hopeless. In my calmer moments, I understand that progress begins with small steps. I'm frustrated those steps are too small. I'm delighted that there will be one database for trials, but if there are no trials, the database doesn't get us very far. We will have a report on the Orphan Drug Act in 18 months' time. In that period, over 3,500 people will be diagnosed with a glioblastoma, and many of them will be dead. Why is it going to take us 18 months to do that? Why can't we change it now? Why, in spite of the huge support we've had from the Secretary of State for Health for this bill, could we not get something much more fierce in the bill? It's not a criticism, it's an observation. I know progress begins slowly, and I'm so grateful that he has taken up this bill and that he has the calm demeanour that I lack, because I don't think the whips would have accepted anything that I would have come up with as a private member's bill. But the time, we need a revolutionary attitude to these things. We either want to see progress and harness progress, and or we're going to come back next year, the year after, and the year after that, asking why there is no progress. And we all, individually and communally, need to dedicate ourselves to that progress and to keep asking the questions and being angry, and simply to refuse to accept that nothing can be done.
I call Charlie Maynard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Edinburgh South West, and the Honourable Member for Mitchell and Morden, and the Honourable Member for Birmingham and Erdington, because I've really enjoyed working with you all on this, all with our own stories. And I should get my own personal interest stated. My sister Georgie is there. She was diagnosed with a GBM nearly 2 years ago. She is, I would say, I'd like to say alive and well, but she's alive and she's doing well. And she has been brave, she has been determined, and she has been an inspiration to all of us. And it's particularly painful as she is a mother of 3, and a wife, and a daughter, and a sister. So we have a lot to focus on, and it is on us collectively. So I'm not going to rehash too much, but I think, while, you know, and I'll try to resist having a cry fest, but it might be difficult, the actions are what we are going to be judged on, and what we as a team can do. And I'm afraid I'm going to throw it a little bit over on the other side, because you are the government now, and really you have more power than we do on this side. So I really, when we leave the chamber today, I really ask each of you to be going, okay, what are we going to actually do? Because that's, you know, the talk in this chamber is nice, but it's actually the actions that count. And I'm going to just pick up on 2 points which I'd particularly like to focus. One is that trial register. And I mean, we've lived it firsthand, Georgie, trying to find what trials are out there. And obviously there aren't enough trials out there. We know that, and that's something that we need to fix. But also just matching patients with trials. I mean, that's not rocket science. This is a very basic thing. And I would also encourage the government to be looking at what's going on in the private sector, because rather than just start it from scratch and take months and months to kind of reinvent the wheel, find out what's going on in the private sector, what's already there in terms of registers of people seeking trials and what trials are out there and build on that. If that's a partnership with some company out there, fine, but let's just move quickly because speed really does count here. The second thing is about orphan drug regulations, and a key trigger for me getting into politics was Brexit. I thought it was a disastrous idea, and I still do. And I still kind of struggle to find any possible gain, but I'll give one gain for Brexit, which we could actually do off here. So the EU has got its regulations around orphan drugs. We could have more generous regulations around orphan drugs. We could pull research into the UK, and that would allow us, by giving it a few extra years on those patents, to encourage people to be digging into this critical research in these critical areas. So if that's one potential gain, I live in hope. But also just a couple of things I'd like to highlight beyond that. So one is, even if we get there, we have to get these products obtained. Reimbursement has to be accessible on the NHS, and that is far from certain. And so kind of ensuring there's a robust, timely, and accessible route to make these drugs available on the NHS and reaching patients, that really counts. So that bit mustn't fall off the radar screen. That's critical. And also just looking at the amount of clinical researchers active in the UK today, we are really, really falling behind. And if we want to get this research moving, we have to really think about what are we doing to get clinical researchers working hard on this space and other spaces, because we're not doing a good enough job on that. And that's all I'm going to say. But I will return to that first point, which is, action. That's what we need. And good to have you here.
I call Sam Rushworth.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West, for bringing this bill and joining his tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Mitcham and Morden, for her campaigning, and also for the powerful speech that she gave a moment ago, calling for a revolution in attitudes. I also want to just briefly thank the honourable member for Calder Valley for what was a very moving speech, and as somebody who has lost a brother much too young, I was deeply moved by his words. But I've come here today to speak on behalf of my constituent, Katie Swinburne, and she is a much-loved school teacher. In fact, she was the school teacher of one of my staff, and a mother of three who was diagnosed with invasive lobular breast cancer. And as mentioned a moment ago, lobular breast cancer is not classed as a rare cancer. In fact, it's the second most common type of breast cancer in the world, with 8,500 diagnoses annually in the UK alone. But I think it shares many characteristics of rare cancers in the sense that it is very difficult to detect. In Katie's case, and in many cases, it does not initially form as a lump in the breast, for example. It has a distinct and different genetics, so it's not detectable in genetic tests, and it's very easily missed in mammograms and ultrasounds. And as a consequence, many of the women who get this form of cancer won't be diagnosed until long after the cancer has already spread. And I'm also told, because thankfully she's watching today, and I received a WhatsApp message a moment before speaking, that a key point that I should make to the Minister is that because it's not separated out, and it does present differently to other forms of breast cancer, it's not separated out in clinical trials. There's very little trial data on it. I met recently on Zoom with Katie and with others who have been campaigning for the moonshot. This is simply £20 million of funding. It's not a lot of money. £20 million that Manchester University could use to better understand the architecture, the sort of biological architecture of this type of cancer, that would then lead to the possibility to to develop the right treatments, because it currently has no specific treatment. And so it's a gentle request, really, that in the next stage of the bill, that this be considered alongside the rare cancers that are put into this bill. And I just want to finish by paying tribute, really, to Katie, but to all of the many brave individuals who I've met. I can't imagine what it's like to have parenting responsibilities and to be young and diagnosed with an advanced stage of cancer, and to know that, frankly, for many of the people who are campaigning, they may not be around to live to see the day that the better drugs and treatments are there, but they are bravely taking up this cause on behalf of those who come after them. Katie was bravely doing a mile a day sponsored walks, and my predecessor in this place joined her on one of those miles. And although we disagree about many things politically, I think that what we've already seen today is that this is a cause that unites, because there is little really more precious in life for any of us than, in fact, there's nothing more precious than time spent with the people that we love. Money can't buy that, nothing can buy that. And the decisions that we make in this place, as I think my honourable friend, Member for Mitcham Morden, made very clear in her very powerful speech, can have real impact in the lives of others. Thank you.
I call Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I have to say, sitting here waiting to speak, I was very pleased that you didn't call me after the Honourable Member for Calder Valley, because I don't think I would have been able to get through part of my speech having listened to his story. I think you did really well. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2008. It's relatively unusual for a man, and the hardest thing that I ever had to do was to tell my two daughters, who were 13 and 14 at the time, about my diagnosis. It was an experience that left me wondering if our family of four was about to become a family of three. I had to explain to all of them that I would have an operation to remove a tumour. I may need another one. As things turned out, my cancer had spread and I did need to have another operation. I would also have to have chemotherapy and radiotherapy, and that was going to take 9 months out of our lives, not just mine, but the lives of my immediate family, my wider family, and our friends. And I consider myself very lucky that the treatment pathway for me was relatively clear. But that is not the case for so many rare cancers. The reach of cancer is an evil that is growing across our society, with nearly 1 in 2 of us projected to get cancer in our lifetime, meaning that we will all know somebody close to us, with a family or friend, that will begin what can be a very traumatic journey. A fight which causes your life to be taken completely out of your hands, which will leave families forced to hear rarely used terms like malignant or metastasise, as if they were common expressions, clouding the horror, really, of medical jargon. It is with these words that I am proud to associate myself with the Honourable Member for Edinburgh South West, and I congratulate him on his campaign demanding better for cancer patients, and especially for bringing forward the Rare Cancers Bill, because it is a powerful and necessary step forward to end the experience that I described in the beginning part of my speech. Rare cancers are often under-researched, and the regulatory environment simply fails to cope with them. They have smaller patient populations, which makes research and investment less appealing, or their evidence base harder to achieve. And where clinical trials are taking place, patients often don't know very much about them. Cancer 52 survey of rare cancer patients shows 65% cited not knowing about trials as the main barrier to accessing the trial in the first place. The bill, as set before Parliament, would seek to rectify these flaws within our system. And I would like to specifically highlight the powers in the bill to ensure patients can get better access and find relevant clinical trials. As highlighted in the Teenage Cancer Trust's Improving Young People's Access to Cancer Clinical Trials report, it is also difficult for the clinical trial leads themselves to find the necessary patients, meaning they struggle to recruit. Both patients and researchers want to be in these clinical trials, but the system doesn't allow for that common sense joining up. And I hope with these changes that people in my constituency, Wokingham, and across England will begin to see a shift towards prioritising rare cancers, because it is long overdue. Last week, I met with a constituent to discuss his wife's cancer. She had, I hope I say this properly, Lyme myosarcoma, which has an incident rate of 6 cases per million people annually in the UK. He explained to me that one of the potential treatment options for his wife is through exploiting faults in the BRCA2 genes or PrAP inhibitors. However, with an estimated 30 new cases of Lyme myosarcoma every year and only 3 with the BRCA2 mutations, there are too few patients to allow for a sufficient clinical trial, and therefore NICE do not license the drugs for this particular cancer. What are the Minister's views on efforts within the European Union's life science industry to develop clear guidance to make it easier for cross-border clinical trials? If this is successful, would tackle one of the major problems for rarer cancers like Lyme myosarcoma. Individual nations may not have a sufficient pool to conduct a clinical trial, but multiple nations working together could. Does the Minister see cross-nation trials as a great potential for developments for oncology? If the EU were to advance easier cross-border cooperation, would this be something that the United Kingdom could potentially negotiate its way into? This is no time for a government to be isolationist. My constituents also highlighted that PARP inhibitors are available in the United States. What efforts is the Minister making to ask that if drugs are approved by the United States FDA, that there is the opportunity for NICE to take the US evidence into account when considering whether to approve licenses for drugs in the UK? Sarcomas are just one tumour type which has poor survival outcomes and limited treatment options. Despite the investment from charities like Sarcoma UK to fund research into new treatments, we do not know enough about the disease because so few people are affected. Other constituents have written in to share their experience of losing loved ones to brain tumours like glioblastoma and blood cancers. All have expressed hope in this bill that it will create a world in which we can better encourage pharmaceutical companies to run trials on rarer cancers to create innovative new treatments. That the pain that they went through will not be a fate that others must endure in the future. Before I conclude, it would be a missed opportunity if I did not ask the Minister about the National Cancer Strategy, which will be so important in ensuring a long-term plan is in place to deliver better services for patients with rare and less common cancers. The NHS needs to be prepared for the innovations of the future by preparing for an increase in demand of companion diagnostics. Current turnaround times for existing tests are already causing delays to optimal treatments. What steps is the Minister taking to ensure there is enough capacity for an ever-increasing demand of diagnostic tests? The National Cancer Strategy needs to be thoroughly scrutinised before its final draft is published to ensure that the measures demanded by cancer charities, patients groups and ideas from the life science sector are properly covered. Finally, the NHS performance must be measured regularly over the lifetime of a strategy to see if improvements are actually being made. And can the Minister explain what mechanisms are being considered for accountability in the National Cancer Strategy? And to finish, can I thank the Honourable Member for Edinburgh South West once again for bringing this bill to the House.
I call Peter Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to support my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West, and I know he's put a huge amount of effort into bringing the bill before the House in collaboration with so many others, including patients and families, professionals, charities. And can I send my condolences to him and his family and wife for the death of his father-in-law, and also to Tilly's family. To lose a child is unbearable and against the natural order of things. And this is a much-needed bill, and I welcome the opportunity to make some observations about it. But before I do, can I refer to my honourable friend, the member for Calder Valley, and his brother. I live in the area of Lund that he referred to, and can I just say to him, it's going to be a remarkable legacy for your brother in that particular area, because it's being rewilded, forest in due course. It's absolutely fantastic. And I invite him and his family, if he so wishes, to come down, and I'll show him around and we can see what legacy his brother has left to us. I also want to refer to comments made by the Chief Executive Officer of the Brain Tumour Charity, Dr. Michelle Arif, I hope I've pronounced her name right, in relation to the context of the bill and why it's before the House. She talked movingly in an online article just last month how during her career she was, to quote, frequently moved by the courage and determination of my patients and their families. In this respect, we urge all of us to support my honourable friend's endeavours to help those people who, as the doctor said, don't have a voice, by giving our unambiguous backing to what she called a bill of hope, Madam Deputy Speaker. But of course, we must ensure that the hope is turned into reality, and that is the job of every member in this chamber. I repeat, turning hope into reality. And we owe it to those affected by rare cancers to champion their needs, their treatment and their lives. In this regard, this proposed piece of legislation will be a starting point, a first base. It will enable and facilitate the promotion of research into rare cancers, better access into clinical trials, as been referred to, and initiate a review on marketing authorisation for so-called orphan products. And that is the particular part of the bill, namely orphan products, that I want to explore in a little bit more detail with your indulgence, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is devastating to have a diagnosis of cancer. We all know members of our families, as has been referred to, who have been diagnosed with one form or another. And the shock and trauma that comes with such news is hard to take in, that the Honourable Member for Wokingham referred to. but then to find out subsequently that the spectrum of intervention with medicines or other allied interventions is limited because of the rare nature of a particular cancer, surely adds to that source of distress and worry. Glioblastoma, as the Honourable Member for Esher and Walton referred to, and my right honourable friend, the Member for Mitcham and Morden. Questions inevitably sweep through the minds of those affected as to whether or not an appropriate medicinal intervention is available or even on the horizon. Orphan products are those drugs which are used to treat rare diseases, not necessarily only rare cancers. And regrettably, sponsors, in other words, the pharmaceutical industry, are wary or reluctant to develop the drugs because of the cost, time and effort when they will not be commercially productive given the number of people who will use them. In reality, given that these potential life-saving or life-changing drugs are not produced, it leaves a significant lacuna in the treatment options for those with rare cancer. In other words, there is a public health need, of that there's absolutely no doubt, Madam Deputy Speaker, but no resource to enable that lacuna to be filled, and that resource should be made available. Given this, I'm pleased that Clause 1 of the Bill will place a duty on the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care to undertake a review of the law in relation to marketing authorisations for potential orphan medicines. And I note that the bill will require an assessment of regulatory approaches in other countries, which is also welcome. And it is an excellent and much needed step in the right direction, linked in with the other requirements in the bill related to research programmes and initiatives. And I believe that that sends a clear and unambiguous message to those affected and those who will be affected. It could be anybody in this chamber, and as we've heard today, it is some people in this chamber, that the government has heard what they have said and are not just listening to that message, to that plea, but are acting in a practical way to change it and to put it into effect. And I believe that will be more than welcome. Madam Deputy Speaker, other countries have introduced similar legislation in this respect. The provision in Clause 1, subsection 2, will help form a more progressive, informed approach to be taken and enable information, practices and protocols from other jurisdictions to be harvested as a result of the requirements of that clause and subsection. For example, the Genetic Alliance points out there are as many as 7,000 rare diseases, possibly more, affecting 1 in 17 people, with treatments available only 1 in 20 approved for rare diseases more generally. Given this, whilst there are not necessarily significant cohorts of people per se in a particular disease category, nevertheless, collectively there are millions of people affected in one fashion or another by a rare disease, including rare cancers. That is no less the case for rare cancers. A disease is a disease, and those affected by it, whether it is rare or not, are entitled to equity of care and intervention. In this regard, such potential interventions cannot simply be left to market arrangements, and that's why it's important to facilitate a more comprehensive approach to the development of orphan medicines. And this must be set into the context of, for example, a 2002 survey of 61 orphan medicines that received EU approvals between 2018 and 21. And of those, 36 orphan medicines were made available in England compared to 55 in Germany, 50 in Italy, 48 in France, and 31 in Spain. And these are not specific in relation to cancer medicines, but it does help to contextualise the difference in numbers in relation to orphan medicines. A research programme between 2020 and 2025 at the Sheffield University, funded by the Wellcome Trust, indicated, furthermore, only a third of EU-authorised orphan drugs are recommended by NICE. Thus, the medical needs of UK rare disease patients are potentially underserved compared to both the USA and the EU. Indeed, the project at the university is called the Orphanisation Project, and clearly there is, as they put it, quote, a major international debate currently ongoing about how we improve patients' access to orphan drugs, raising important questions about how to value these medicines and the ethics of resource allocation. And it sets out a path, so to speak, in being creative in progressing a relatively new concept of orphanisation as a way of understanding contemporary changes in the biopharmaceutical sector. In particular, the project examines the extent to which orphanisation is occurring in the EU, UK and the USA, and it's seeking to see how it is informed by various technologies, institutions and actors addressing the implications for industry, health policy, industry and health policy. And I do look forward to the progress it will make. I believe the proposals in this bill will help, if followed through systematically and consistently, to change that scenario for the better. International explorations and comparisons are one method to inform decision makers as to how they can be more proactive in facilitating access to medicines to those most in need of them, especially when the size and extent of the available medicinal range is very limited, as in the case of the issues we're talking about today, and rare cancers in particular and rare diseases more generally. Madam Deputy Speaker, once again, can I thank my honourable friend for enabling the House to debate this issue and the opportunity to tease out many of the issues that are affecting our constituents. And as I referred to earlier, the opportunity to raise the issue of crucial and life-saving and life-enhancing treatments for diseases more generally. In conclusion, I want yet again to pay tribute to all those colleagues who brought their stories, their experiences to us today. They've spoken, including my honourable friend, the member for Calder Valley, Mitcham and Morden, Wokingham, member for Whitney and others. And they do deserve our admiration and thanks, but more importantly, they need our support to get the job done. And that's a point made by so many. Such expositions, however painful for the honourable members concerned, bring home the very real need for this House to act upon this matter, which is literally a matter of life and death. Finally, I look forward to the opportunity of seeing the progress of the bill through the House in the coming weeks, as no doubt many others will. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for your indulgence.
Dr. Lauren Sullivan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm here today to support the Rare Cancers Bill, a vital piece of legislation introduced by our honourable friend, the member from Edinburgh South West. I want to begin by paying tribute to his father-in-law and all those that have shared their stories here today. His story, like so many, is a stark reminder of how aggressive and under-researched cancers can be, leaving patients with little or no hope. It is assumed that rare cancers, as has been mentioned here today, affects a few number of people, but this is not the case. Cancer Research UK say that rare and less common cancers account for 47% of all UK cancer diagnoses and 55% of all cancer-related deaths. 82% of rare cancer patients were never even consulted about joining a clinical trial. And this means that with each individual rare cancer, which may affect relatively few people, together it makes up almost half of cancer cases. And yet the funding and research remains disproportionately low. Now I would like to briefly mention Charlie Schranger, who is one of my constituents in Gravesham, like so many, is fighting cholangiocarcinoma, or bioduct cancer, the supposedly rare but devastating form of liver cancer. Now this is facing a rising incidence. So from 2001, 2.9 out of 100,000 people were diagnosed with this. Now, today, 2018 even, it's 4.6. 79% of these patients are diagnosed stage 3 or stage 4, meaning that their likelihood of survival is limited. Now, histotripsy is a non-invasive treatment which uses sonic beam therapy. Incredible, absolutely incredible, non-invasive.
The problem is we don't have one in the UK. It costs £10 million to have one of these machines. Let's get one here. Let's get one here, because for people facing this disease, as well as pancreatic cancer, this is a lifesaver and they desperately need it. As Charlie put it, I was lucky enough to afford treatment abroad, but I know many that aren't. They don't have an option. Why should their chances depend on their bank balance? We must recognise that rare doesn't mean insignificant. And people across the UK are battling cancers that remain underfunded, under-researched and underserved by clinical trials. This is criminal. This is a pattern that is repeated again and again. The bile duct cancer, glioblastoma, leiomyosarcoma, a rare soft tissue cancer that demands personalised medicine, pancreatic cancer, blood cancers. Again, each of these cancers devastate lives. We've discussed what the bill can do: appoint a national specialty lead for rare cancers, review and improve the UK orphan drug regulations, and improve data sharing. Now, as my work as a research scientist in biochemistry, I came across, and I worked on neglected tropical diseases, infectious diseases. I came across Drugs for Neglected Disease Initiative. They were launched 25 years ago, and they came about to coordinate research outcomes, negotiate with big pharma costs, looking at existing drugs and testing them with other drugs, neglected diseases, and they are now eliminating diseases across the globe. It can be done. We've got the blueprint here. So I would ask and urge the Minister to reach out to this initiative and look and see what we can learn and implement here. For too long, rare neglected cancers have meant a rare chance of survival, and that must change. And I think the strength of feeling everybody in here, there is the will to do that. And I look forward to seeing the bill go forward and see that those are not left behind and that we find a cure for everybody. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for allowing me to speak today, and thank you for bringing it forward.
I call Martin Rhodes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've already heard in this debate so much moving and powerful testimony that despite the tragic impact that rare cancers have on people across the UK, they garner too little attention, are under-researched and lack investment in their treatment. Though cancer survival rates rose by nearly 10% between 2005 and 2020, rare cancers still have one of the lowest survival rates, leaving too many people without hope. Thus, to help combat this, I thank the Honourable Member for Edinburgh South West for introducing this bill. I will argue in favour of this today using 3 examples. Firstly, the story of a constituent suffering from a rare cancer. Second, the importance of this bill for extremely rare cancers. And lastly, its importance for future research. There are many rare forms of cancer that individuals suffer, so often without specialised treatments or public awareness. But every rare cancer patient has a name and a story. Take that of a constituent I recently met in Parliament at an event for World Cancer Day, who suffers from T-cell large granular lymphocyte leukemia. While the 5-year survival rate for leukemia currently stands at 55%, the figure for acute myeloid leukemia, a rare and aggressive form of leukemia, is one of the lowest of all cancers. It stands at a 22% survival rate beyond 5 years after diagnosis. This means that sadly nearly 80% of those diagnosed with AML today will not survive to the end of this Parliament. Surgery is not a viable treatment option for those diagnosed with leukemia. Therefore, patients with leukemia often depend on the discovery of new and innovative treatments to survive the disease. Though every cancer has a name and a story, there are some so rare that there's little representation of them even in debates like this. This brings me to my second example, composite hemangioendothelioma, or CHE for short. This was only first medically identified in 2006, and by 2022 had less than 60 cases reported in English language literature. Because of its rarity, it's hard to treat and garners little attention from companies that could develop treatments. However, those affected by CHE have names, families and stories. Hopefully mentioning CHA in this debate may in a small way help raise awareness of its existence. Furthermore, this bill will assist this matter as it will appoint a named person responsible for overseeing the delivery of research into rare cancer treatments. This will facilitate some political accountability for rare cancer research and encourage an ecosystem which can hopefully lead to future treatments or at least attention for even some of the rarest cancers like CHE. Talking of treatments, this brings me to my last example, which is earlier this week I met with a constituent who is a researcher at the University of Glasgow and was in Parliament for the STEM for Britain exhibition. We discussed her research on a novel approach to teaching osteosarcoma, the most common primary bone cancer. Despite this, only 160 people are diagnosed with osteosarcoma each year in the UK. This is fewer than 3 people for every 1 million people in the population, making it a rare cancer under this bill. Current treatments lack specificity in targeting the tumour and often have unwanted side effects. My constituents' research looked at the potential use of small molecules as a more effective and non-invasive treatment for osteosarcoma. Therefore, the support of information sharing in the research registry system through this bill will help researchers like my constituent. It will give them greater access to the patient population of those with rare cancers like osteosarcoma to help with research and clinical trials. A patient survey in 2024 found 82% of those with a rare and less common cancer were not offered a clinical trial. This is why this bill is important, because it will help foster an environment where more research and clinical trials for rare cancers, such as osteosarcoma, can happen. For patients like my constituent, suffering from T-cell large granular lymphocyte leukemia, for those diagnosed with the least understood cancers, and for the researchers trying to find new treatments, this bill represents a commitment to the fight against rare cancers. I therefore urge the House to support my honourable friends in this bill today.
I call Chris MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For those of us who have lost a friend or a family member to cancer, we no doubt heard them described, I think, often somewhat unhelpfully as courageous. But I have to say this morning, I think we've witnessed what I would describe as the most courageous exposition I've ever heard in my life from my friend, the member for Calder Valley. And I would like to thank him for the privilege of allowing us to listen to the loving tribute to his brother. We also heard from a number of members, the member for Kings Winford and South Staffordshire, the member for Witney, and I think most forcefully from the member for Mitcham and Morden, about the pressure of time, the need to do something urgently in terms of finding a cure or a treatment for rare cancers. And we've heard a number of moving speeches this morning, but I am actually going to allow members just to relax and recharge your emotional batteries a little bit, because I'm going to address this issue of time and talk about the practical considerations of how we can turn drug discovery into treatment, and to do this as speedily as possible. And to do that, I'm going to lift the lid on our drugs supply chain and also the vital role that the NHS can play in this too. So first, on the drug supply chain, I think there are lessons here that we can learn from the COVID pandemic. When, of course, we developed a vaccine very quickly here in the UK at Oxford, but we also saw quite quickly that the vaccine was worth nothing until it was in the arms of the population. And to do that required a big effort, including in industry. As we heard from the member from Gravesham, industry is important in this as well. And I have in my constituency in the town of Billingham a factory there, Fujifilm, who manufactured one of the COVID vaccines and will shortly turn Billingham into the largest biopharmaceutical manufacturing centre in the UK. But they found that they had a big problem at the time that they were making the vaccines. And this brings into play another town, which is just up the River Tees from Billingham, actually in the constituency of my honourable friend, the member for Bishop Auckland. It's a town you might have heard of during the pandemic, called Bishop Auckland. It became famous for a particular reason during the pandemic, but maybe you're not cited or if I can, on what the actual reason that I'm going to talk about, which has more to do with glass than glasses. And it's because the town of Billingham so Barnard Castle is home to GlaxoSmithKline, that actually did the bottling of the vaccines. And there was at that time a global shortage of bottles for the vaccines. And we have in the UK only one glass manufacturer capable of doing that, though soon there will be another in St Helens. And so hopefully with that sort of little overview, you get a sense that actually there is a big industrial supply chain issue that we need to address before we can get the treatments to the people who need them the most. And in fact, there are a number of researchers in these areas who are working on this. So when you think of research in the context of rare cancers, I'm sure you're thinking of people in white coats and laboratories at places like Oxford, Cambridge and Imperial. But I also urge you to think of the process operators in Billingham, the bottle fillers in Barnard Castle and the furnace operators at places like Glass Futures in St Helens, who are also working hard on research projects in order to deliver these treatments. The second aspect I would like us to consider is the role that the NHS can and must play. And really what I want to see is a transformatively different approach from the NHS in this area. So a month ago I met in Parliament representatives from the Pancreatic Cancer Trust, who I know are supporting this bill as well. And they talked to me about the treatment for pancreatic cancer, pancreatic enzyme replacement therapy, and the difficulties they have in sourcing sufficient quantities of this treatment. And this, this is, I'm sure we all know from our constituency surgeries, this is an issue with common drugs as well for people who are suffering with other conditions, people who have children who have ADHD and so on, struggle to get the drugs. And part of the issue here is that we are relying so much on imports, when in fact we could be manufacturing these products in the UK ourselves. The NHS is the single biggest purchaser of drugs in the world. It has the market power to demand that production is centred in the UK. Now clearly this brings good economic benefits to the UK, but it will shorten cycle times for innovation because the researchers and the manufacturers are close to one another. It will ensure that we have security of supply in the UK, and of course it means we can be proud in the UK of manufacturing drugs that will help to treat people around the world. This also fits, of course, with our industrial strategy. My right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Health, was talking about this only yesterday, the importance of life sciences in our industrial strategy, creating British jobs in research and in factories as well. So in conclusion then, I would like to thank very much my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West, for bringing this bill. He described his father-in-law as a dignified man. He gave an incredibly dignified speech. I'm sure his father-in-law will be very proud of that. I think we look forward to the days when people who suffer from rare cancers are not offered treatments as he described, as breathing into a brown paper bag, or my honourable friend, the member for South Shields, described taking a paracetamol, but instead that we use the power of our NHS and the efficiency of our UK supply chains to turn discoveries into drugs and to turn trials into life-saving treatments.
I call Lorraine Beavers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. I'd also like to thank my honourable friend for bringing this forward today. I remember the day my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. I remember my mum and dad picking me up off the floor. I was supposed to be supporting them, but that didn't happen that day. Dr. Lau at Blackpool Victoria Hospital explained that my dad's cancer was terminal. My dad was given chemotherapy initially to try and shrink the tumours and to give us more time. And then later asked if he would take part in a trial using immunotherapy. It was explained that the immune system doesn't recognise cancer as being alien and a threat, and immunotherapy teaches the immune system to recognise cancer, and so it enables the body's own immune system to fight back. My dad was a fighter, and he was willing to try anything. My dad's body struggled with chemotherapy, and after nearly losing him twice in a 12-month period, it was stopped. But the immunotherapy continued, and he finished the course without any complications. Once my dad started the treatment, the cancers, and there were many, never moved. To this day, we don't know whether this treatment cured him and he was left with just scar tissue or the cancers were laid dormant. What I can tell you is my dad didn't die of cancer, It was something else that took him from us. My family believes that we were given an extra 3 years of loving and being loved by my lovely dad because of immunotherapy. And we will always be grateful for the Christmas days, the birthday celebrations, and sometimes the tears we were all able to share with my wonderful, caring dad. Madam Deputy Speaker, people with rare cancers deserve the funding and research trials that this bill will initiate. They should have the chance of life that my dad was given, that starts with ensuring patients can get better access to clinical trials. Many people miss out on these potential life-extending trials because the information just isn't out there as much as it needs to be. Recent research has found 82% of respondents with less common or rare cancers were not offered an opportunity to be part of a clinical trial. This has got to change, and this bill will achieve this. Madam Deputy Speaker, I speak in support of the Rare Cancer Bill because I believe everyone who is diagnosed with cancer should be given every chance of survival, and without the measures outlined in this bill, people with rare cancers will die sooner than other cancer patients without being given the chances to fight this terrible disease. I speak for them. I speak so others may have the chances awarded to my dad. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to thank Dr. Lowe, my dad's consultant, for giving an 81-year-old man the precious gift of life for a few years longer. Thank you.
Ewan Steinbank.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I want to thank my honourable friend for bringing forward this Rare Cancers Bill. It may be the most repeated phrase in this chamber, but politics is about choices. The member for Edinburgh South West, having ranked so highly in the private member's bill ballot, an early accolade in this Parliament, chose to bring forward a bill that will put patients suffering from a rare cancer and their families higher upon the list of priorities. As was so movingly put by my honourable friend for Calder Valley, what I hope this will mean in time to my constituents in Falkirk and for families across the United Kingdom is that in some instances we will get precious hours, days, weeks and years extra to spend with our loved ones. Every member of this House and every constituent I've spoken to about this has a story of a loved one who has suffered through the heartbreaking cruelty of a cancer diagnosis. I lost 2 of my grandparents in their early 60s. I still remember the 7 years of my life I had to spend with my granddad Robin. We still found plenty of time to exchange robust views on football, and I'm sure if he had more time with us, we'd be exchanging our views on life and politics today as well. He was lucky, though, to meet all 4 of his grandchildren thanks to the immense care he received from his doctors and support from his family. I remember my granny Janet, who passed away in 2012 after a 10-month battle with a brain tumour. I remember most fondly her fussing over everyone in the house to make sure they had absolutely everything they needed at all times. And I remember holding her hand in Strathcarron Hospice, where she had volunteered for a number of years and then subsequently received care from in her final days. One thing I've drawn from these experiences is the value our NHS and hospice staff have for both those who have cancer, but also for their families. They're the ones who take the worst parts of life day in, day out and allow us to endure, and are the people we should be arming with the best possible tools to treat illness and disease. While statistically half of us in this chamber may have or one day will have to comprehend our own diagnosis from some type of cancer, the definition of rare cancer for the purposes of this bill, one that affects 1 in 2,000 people, is something we must acknowledge as requiring active intervention in order to put research, treatment and clinical pathways on the same parity as the evolution of other cancer research. As has been mentioned, when we talk about rare cancers, we're talking about 47% of all cancer diagnoses. I'll go through the bill in each of its specific clauses to show why I'm supporting it. Clause 1 in the statutory requirement for review into orphan medicines will be an essential step to comprehensively understand the current availability of medicines, as well as how they can be best calibrated towards new treatments and new research. The comparative approach the bill puts forward for this review acknowledges that while we have a proud history of world-class research, other countries have been able to make substantial strides in this area, while we have not in recent years. In the last 6 years, the UK has dropped from being ranked 2nd for the availability of orphan medicines, only been in Germany, to 10th in England and 13th in Scotland today, when compared to other European countries. To me, that does not necessarily look like regression, but potentially exposes stagnation in advancing research to the benefit of those suffering from a rare cancer. The British pharmaceutical industry have stated that it is increasingly challenging to develop medicine for rare diseases in this country, citing amongst other things the low prospect of NHS reimbursement for rare disease medicines. Clause 2 adds the specific duties on the Secretary of State to promote research into rare cancers, ensure patients can be easily contacted about such research, and that there is appropriate oversight into rare cancers. This is again a progressive move, as the duty to promote research will write into law that the Health Secretary, whomever that is at the specific time, must take a proactive approach to maintain and promote rare cancer research. It embeds a duty into the government's job description to make sure that ease of contact is properly facilitated and that there is appropriate oversight. The bill is not overextending when it says that strategic coordination is the key here. The appointment of a National Specialty Lead for Rare Cancers will put a champion into law who can cut through any silos that currently exist or start to develop as the effect of the bill takes hold. Clause 3 of the bill is a very critical part of this framework, as it aids in building a robust evidential basis for clinical trials by making a bespoke register for those with a rare cancer. The NHS sharing information from the National Disease Registration Service with the NIHR be part of research registry so that patients can be identified and contacted will improve an issue I've heard come up several times speaking to organisations in this space, that there are not enough people available for clinical trials for rare cancers. Correspondingly, as has been mentioned by other members, there is clearly a substantial barrier at the patient end, as Cancer 52 found that 82% of those with a rare cancer had not been offered a clinical trial. This evidences the clear case for change this bill puts forward. With rapid advances in cancer treatment, there's a massive opportunity to take steps forward in increasing survivability after diagnosis. For all these new treatments to be effective, there need to be corresponding clinical trials. Currently, connecting those with a rare cancer to clinical research involves an amount of luck, that the information about the trial will make its way to the patient and that they'll be aware of a clinical trial. Organising this register so that clinical trials can get in touch with patients will simplify and improve the efficiency and efficacy of this system, saving time and increasing the chances of successful trials. I give this bill my full support. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
David Pinto-Jaczynski.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I start by thanking my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West, for raising this deeply important issue. I know I speak for everyone here when I say how moved I was by his words today about his father-in-law, and also by the story he told about Kira, and I want to join him in welcoming Kira's family. I also want to pay tribute to the member for Mitcham and Morden for her campaigning on this issue. I know her sister would be very proud of her. And I want to also pay tribute to everyone who's spoken, both for their bravery, but also for the immense bravery of their constituencies, for the immense bravery of their constituents and family members. I particularly want to recognise the member for Kingsford and South Staffordshire and the story of Dan, the member for Esher and Walton, the member for Blackpool North and Fleetwood for her very powerful speech about her father, the member for Falkirk for his speech about his grandparents, but particularly, and I want to give special mention to my honourable friend, the member for Calder Valley. And I want to say to him, I'm so sorry I didn't get a chance to meet your brother Alex. He sounds like a phenomenal human being. I'm so sorry for your loss, but I know he would be very proud of you. My heart goes out to you all. Thank you all for sharing your stories. Thank you for your bravery. As so many of these stories show, the term rare cancers is misleading. The cancers we class as rare in total account for almost half of all cancer diagnoses each year. And tragically, as has been mentioned, they account for over half, 55% of all cancer deaths. Given that 1 in 2 of us develop some form of cancer in our lifetimes on average, the chances of experiencing one of these so-called rare or less common cancers ourselves, or seeing it diagnosed in a loved one, are tragically higher than the name suggests. Far higher. 182,000 people will be diagnosed in the coming year with this type of cancer. That is equivalent to a city the size of Swindon. And sadly, 92,000 people will lose their lives as a result. That's a city the size of Chester. And behind each one of these tragic statistics lies a story of families bereaved, of mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, children lost, of lives torn apart. And this was brought home to me when I visited high cancer care in my own constituency, to hear the stories of many people battling to live with cancer. Their bravery is inspiring, and they need our help. Now, may I also commend the work the government is doing to improve cancer outcomes for all. They've just launched last month the call for evidence to inform the development of a national cancer plan. And I hope that we can pass this bill to help support its efforts. Madam Deputy Speaker, the illnesses classified as rare or less common are amongst some of the very cruelest. This bill seeks to address some of the fundamental reasons as to why diagnosis with a comparatively rarer form of cancer can leave patients with a disproportionately lower chance of making a full recovery. For a start, rare cancers are harder to diagnose. There are many reasons for this. Some of the more common cancers have screening programs. This means many people are diagnosed before they have symptoms. Sadly, this is much less common when it comes to the case of rare cancers. Additionally, doctors see the symptoms of common cancers more frequently and so are more likely to spot them when they see them. We also know that currently 82% of patients with a rare or less common form of cancer are not offered a clinical trial. This bill will seek to reduce the knowledge gap when it comes to rare cancers, proposing a national specialty lead for rare cancers to advise on research design and facilitate collaboration in rare cancer research, and a specific rare cancer registry to share information to improve the recruitment of participants for rare cancer clinical trials. However, Madam Deputy Speaker, while we need to incentivise research, this is not the only barrier we face to improving rare cancer outcomes. The comparatively lower occurrence of many rare cancers mean that whilst drugs to combat them often do exist, they are not developed by the pharma industry for economic reasons, even though there is a pressing and urgent need for them. These orphan drugs have the potential not only to save thousands of lives, but also to provide hundreds and thousands of families with that most valuable thing, the thing the member for Calder Valley referred to, more time spent with their loved ones. Yet under normal market conditions, pharma companies may be unwilling to invest in research and developments of new treatments for diseases that affect fewer people, the most common forms of cancer. The figures are stark. If you look at 5 of the 6 less survivable cancers, they received only 17% of the research funding of more survivable cancers. This bill, by proposing that the Secretary of State be required to review the current laws on marketing authorisations for these orphan drugs, and by placing a duty on government to further support research and innovation, would go a long way to achieving something which I know many of us would view as common sense: incentivising the production of these medical products and putting them to use where they are so badly needed in the diagnosis, prevention and treatment of cancer. Madam Deputy Speaker, may I also pay tribute to my honourable friend and his team for the work they've done in improving the power of collaboration between members of Parliament, the charity sector and patient advocates. Drawing on medical expertise and lived experience, their diligence in bringing about this bill is borne out by the widespread support across the House that it has gathered. And I note that Pancreatic Cancer UK saying this bill has the potential to transform survival for rare cancers by encouraging a greater focus and drive to research. And the Brain Tumour Charity has also praised it. I know from my own experience, Madam Deputy Speaker, talking to constituents in Hendon and visiting hospitals such as the Royal Free, just how crucial one word can be: hope. Cancer is one of the defining health issues of our time, causing the death of 460 people in this country every single day. And we know there is no silver bullet. We must fight cancer on all fronts, from research to prevention to diagnosis to treatment. And I know the government is, of course, wholly committed to doing that. We know that thanks to huge oncological steps forward in recent years, outlooks for cancer patients have improved dramatically. We have reached a milestone that over 50% of people diagnosed with cancer in England and Wales now survive their disease for 10 years or more. Yet this number falls sharply for many of the rarer cancers we have talked about today. We must recognise, as this bill does, where the shortfalls are in our shared knowledge and our resources we put into the rarer forms of this disease. We have a duty to put this right. We must ensure those suffering from rare and less common forms of cancer and those yet to be diagnosed have as much cause for hope as possible. I beg to support this bill.
Yeah. I call Jenny Riddle-Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I start by thanking my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West, for bringing forward this really important bill. And I thank the many other members from both sides that have contributed so movingly today. I'd also like to thank my constituents who reached out to me to share their views, and I'm going to try and keep my contributions brief because I know others will want to speak. I'd like to in particular thank Maria and her daughter Lauren, who told me about Maria's journey and her fight against leiomyosarcoma, which I'm the second person today to struggle to pronounce that word, and how that diagnosis had turned her life upside down. She was diagnosed during the COVID lockdowns. Now, as you can imagine, navigating that pandemic was hard enough, but navigating it while someone you love most in the world is suffering with cancer is nearly impossible. Now, Maria is still living with leiomyosarcoma and having chemotherapy once a month. But as she and her daughter told me, living with cancer is tough enough. But when it's a rare cancer, you live with the fear that the disease will act quicker than the research makes progress. That's why this bill is so important. We need to close the gap in the treatment of rare cancers to make sure more people are diagnosed with rare cancers and that they have the same chance of survival as other cancers. Now, another constituent of mine knows the cost of this all too well. He's asked me not to share his or his wife's name, but instead to tell her story. She passed away last year after also being diagnosed with leiomyosarcoma. Despite the best efforts of the oncology unit, the rarity of the cancer meant it took too long for them to identify her condition, and a year of chemotherapy treatment followed, but it was sadly to no avail. Now, though I have 2 examples of leiomyosarcoma in my constituency, it is incredibly rare. One of the challenges with this cancer is the genetic variability, and it has many different subtypes. Personalised medicine is particularly important for rare cancers with different subtypes, but due to the low number of patients with leiomyosarcoma, it's extremely difficult and, if not nearly impossible, to run robust clinical trials. But research is possible, and great strides are being made in the US at the moment, which show better treatment and better outcomes are possible. So it is vital that we incentivise research and investment into the treatment of these rare cancers and begin to close this gap. So thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you again to the Honourable Member for Edinburgh South West for bringing forward this important debate and the bill indeed.
I call Sean Davies.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to thank my honourable friend for Edinburgh South West for bringing forward this bill. He's channelled his personal experience and that of his family to produce a vital piece of legislation. And I hope he will succeed in driving change on this issue, and he certainly has my support and all members of the House support. And it's on days like this that I often call members of Parliament from right across the House, honourable friends rather than honourable members, because this is a cause that certainly does unite us. And I know from listening to and reading the emails I've had from Telford constituents that they are fully behind this bill too. I would like to join my honourable friends who have paid tribute to many of those people today who have told the stories of their loved ones in their own families and their own communities. They are far braver than I. But what I will say is that next Thursday I will be a bearer at a funeral for a very special woman in my life who I am not quite as brave to be able to tell her story today, but maybe one day I will. I've heard about the devastating impacts from a number of constituents who have contacted me to share their stories. I've heard from one constituent about the mother of his 3 teenage children in her 40s who's battling with terminal pancreatic cancer after a late diagnosis. Among those stories, a familiar theme arose. Conditions like this cancer are being diagnosed too late, with no treatment available, giving my constituents' loved ones just months to live. I focus on this particular cancer because it is an example of the scandal that is rare cancer treatment. It's classed as a rare cancer by this bill because it affects less than 1 person in every 2,000. Every year, 1 in every 6,000 people is diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and half of those will die, sadly, within 3 months. There are roughly 107,000 people in Telford in my constituency, which means that 18 of my constituents each and every year will be diagnosed with this awful cancer, and 9 of them will die within 3 months of being diagnosed. is absolutely shocking. And I owe it to those 18 people in my constituency to be in this chamber today, speaking up and asking for and demanding for drastic change to take place. It's easy to see how this problem can arise, though it doesn't make it any less galling. In a healthcare system under strain, which is particularly failing cancer patients, as of last year, UK cancer survival rates were 25 years behind some other European countries. And you can see how decision makers might be faced with Sophie's choice, the unendable task of prioritising cancer treatments. When resources are scarce, you prioritise the treatments that will save the most people, but that's no consolation to the 47% of cancer patients in the UK whose cancers are rare and less common. An even more damning statistic is that sufferers from rare and less common cancers make up the majority of cancer deaths, as we've heard today, 55%. It's clear that this is not sustainable or fair or just, and we can't let one single cancer patient slip through the cracks of our healthcare service, let alone 90,000 people each and every year. All too often, we've heard today, people in my constituency and across the country will rally around to raise money for their loved ones, their children, to be sent to receive treatment. And on one level, that is amazing to see. But on another, it's so depressing that that has to be done in order to access this life-saving treatment. To sum up, Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill is about acknowledging that we can do better. The treatment of rare cancer patients is a scandal, not in the sense that any one individual is liable or culpable, but because the system as a whole has let tens of thousands of cancer patients down. To the healthcare and research sectors, we say you must do better, and we want you to do better, and we will work alongside you to do better, and this bill is one welcome first step in doing that. I urge the government to be bold. We can do a lot as this cohort of members of Parliament on this agenda and this cohort of government ministers. We talk a lot in this place about hope and change. Well, goodness me, what other better example is there than this bill to provide hope and change to millions of people across our country? Let's make cancer history.
Ina Murray. Deputy Speaker. There is hardly a family in the UK that hasn't been touched by cancer in some way, and this chamber this morning has shown how much we do reflect the population. The feeling of fear, anxiety and heartbreak that comes with it. But for those diagnosed with rare cancer, the challenges are even greater. Delayed diagnosis, fewer treatment options and the shocking lack of research that means that these patients and their families are often left in the dark. And I'm glad we are united that this has to change, which is why I'm so proud to support the Rare Cancers Bill brought forward by my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West. And I actually think I possibly worked with your father-in-law at Bill Baxter many years ago, because we've now got the chance to turn the tide and give people with rare cancers the focus. We've talked a lot this morning about the statistics. The result, we still don't get the access to the same investment in research or access to clinical trials as common cancers. The results, survival rates for some of the least survivable cancer, like pancreatic cancer, brain cancer, stomach cancer, are stuck at just 16%, which is not good enough. 7 weeks ago, I lost my dad. More time has now passed since his death than the time we had between his diagnosis and his passing. The grief is still exceptionally raw. Thank you.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and just want to pay tribute to her dad. He would be extremely proud of her and the speech that she's making today in contribution to this debate.
Thank you very much for that intervention. The Brain Tumour Charity and Brain Tumour Research have highlighted that time and time again, Just 1% of national cancer research funding goes towards brain tumours, despite them being the biggest cancer killer of children and adults under 40, and that is totally unacceptable. People who are dealing with these devastating diagnoses need more than words. They need real investment in clinical trials and better pathways to diagnosis. This bill is about fairness. It is about making sure that tackling the lack of funding, the difficulty getting patients into research, and the absence of clear government leadership in this area. People miss out beyond life-changing trials because they simply don't know that they exist. And we talked about, the member for Mitcham and Morden talked about a universal system in this country, but we also have one of the most siloed systems, that people in one part of the system often don't know what's going on in other parts, and we need that to stop. We've also talked a lot about the importance of the approaches in places like the United States, where targeted policies have led to surges of new treatments for rare cancers. But also we need to recognise the other aspect of what's going on in the United States when a raft of executive orders from the White House are putting higher education and their clinical trial world currently into a tailspin. I want to pay tribute to the people that have helped me a lot over the last few weeks, and particularly paying tribute to my honourable friend from Mitcham and Morden. She talks about being angry, but I just remember that anger is a natural part of grief, and it's a natural stage in grief. But it's also a massive, massive driver for change and for getting things done. I'm not at the angry stage just yet. I will be at some stage, and when I get there, I will be certainly joining you. It is something that all we get. Somebody said to me many years ago, the greatest gift any one of us could give is a gift of time. No matter what our political differences on every other part of this, we have a chance today to give others the gift of time. To make sure that no other families like ours, go through what we've done. Please pass this bill. Thank you.
I call Paulette Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to begin by thanking the Honourable Member for Edinburgh and South West for bringing forward this important piece of legislation and for his tireless work in championing the need for greater focus on research into rarer cancers. Having worked as a district nurse for over 25 years, I have seen again and again the devastation that cancer brings, not just to those diagnosed, but to their families, their friends, and their communities. The harsh reality is that 1 in 2 of us will face cancer at some point in our lives, an issue that touches all of us in some way. While we made significant strides in cancer treatment and survival rates, progress has not been equal. Some cancers, like the rarer, less survivable cancers, have been unjustly left behind. Cancers such as pancreatic, esophageal, liver, brain, stomach still face staggeringly low survival rates. As it stands today, the least survivable cancers have a 5-year survival rate of just 16%, compared to 55% of all other cancers. This disparity is not just a statistic, it's a failure in our services and the way it is researched. One that has cost lives, shattered families, and has left too many of us without hope. A key driver of this has been the chronic underfunding and lack of focus on research into these cancers, which has meant that we lack tests, the tools and treatments needed to give people a fighting chance, and the consequences of this neglect are devastating. Madam Deputy Speaker, this issue is deeply personal to me. I have lost loved ones to pancreatic cancer, a disease that steals lives with ruthless efficiency. I lost my best friend, a woman full of life and love, to this cruel illness. She endured months of uncertainty before finally receiving a diagnosis in the August, only to pass away shortly after. Her story of the delayed diagnosis, missed opportunities, and a system that had failed her, and sadly her story is not unique. I find it truly shocking that in 2025, more than half of those diagnosed with pancreatic cancer will die within 3 months, and only 7% of people will survive. Pancreatic cancer is the 5th biggest cancer killer in the UK, yet it only receives 3% of the UK cancer research budget. This lack of investment has meant we are not seeing the treatment breakthroughs that have transformed outcomes for other types of cancer. But it doesn't have to be this way. We know that sustained research funding and strategic focus from the government can dramatically improve survival rates. We have seen it work for other cancers. I particularly welcome and this is why I actually support the bill. I particularly welcome the proposal to nominate a named lead to focus on these rarer cancers, ensuring they are no longer overlooked, as well as the provisions to give people a better opportunity to take part in innovative, cutting-edge trials. The Rare Cancers Bill offers a roadmap to bring real-life, life-saving changes to those diagnosed with life-threatening diseases. This bill is not just about policy, it is about people. It is about giving hope to those who have been left behind. As chair of the APPG on less survivable cancers, and I'm also the vice chair of the Health Select Committee, I firmly believe that through the proposed provisions of this bill, we can start, and I say start, to bring forward access to innovative treatments that could turn the tide. So I say to members in this House, let us be bold. Let us make a difference. Let us ensure that future generations have a better chance of survival than those who came before them. Let us send a clear message to patients and their families that they are not forgotten. This is our moment to make a lasting impact. Let us make it count. Let us support this bill. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
I call Daniel Francis.
Thank you, Deputy Chair, and I want to start by paying tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West, for introducing the bill and for his work in bringing about this necessary debate on rare cancers. I'd also like to pay tribute to all members who've spoken today, but particularly my friend from Calder Valley for his heartbreaking tribute, quite frankly, to his brother. Like too many across this House and throughout the United Kingdom, I've been on the receiving end of that devastating news that a loved one's been diagnosed with cancer. But when that cancer is defined as rare, it's infinitely more terrifying when confronted with the reality that there's a lack of funding and research dedicated to rare cancers. I therefore welcome the 3 steps that the bill would take to encourage further research into rare cancers. And I welcome that this bill would place a duty on the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care to facilitate or otherwise promote research to rare cancers. This would ensure that appropriate arrangements are in place for patients to be easily contacted about research opportunities and clinical trials, and it will also ensure that there's adequate oversight of research delivery for rare cancers. I'd also like to pay tribute to my honourable friends from Mitcham and Malden for her dedication in bringing glioblastoma and other types of brain cancers to the forefront of the political debate. And I'd like to mention the all-party group on brain tumours and their work in raising awareness of the issues facing the Brain Tumour Society. I've seen firsthand how devastating glioblastoma can be. My dear friends and constituents, Anne and Richard Lucas, lost their son Fionn in 2022, Theon was diagnosed with glioblastoma aged 58 in June 2022, and his cancer left him with a very short time to live, and he died 2 months later. The Lucas family have supported the work of the Brain Tumour Charity in order to help find new treatments, offer the highest level of support and drive urgent change given the charity's aims of saving and improving lives and carrying out research into brain tumours globally. Glioblastomas are fast-growing brain tumours and the most common type of cancerous malignant brain tumour in adults. And yet, as has been said, of course, there's still a lack of funding. And of the 54% of research that is specifically about rare cancers, only 16% of that is focused on brain and nervous system cancers. I therefore welcome this bill, thank my honourable friend from Edinburgh South West and Mitcham and Morden, and place on record my support for the aims of the bill to support research and support those impacted by rare cancers.
I call Sarah Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I will try to keep my remarks brief, keen that other colleagues will also get to speak in this really important debate. As we've heard, rare cancers are defined as those that affect fewer than 1 in 2,000 individuals. In Hyndburn, this equates to impacting an estimated 1,500 people. But behind every number is a story, as we've heard, of a patient and those who love them, of lives cut short that could be saved, or lives that could be prolonged if the right diagnosis and treatment were available. And I wanted to spend a few minutes speaking of the constituents in Hyndburn that have reached out to me and some of my personal experience. So I'm really grateful to Carol, who's reached out on behalf of herself and her daughter Emma, who's currently battling a rare cancer and is the mum of 2 girls, and for whom we know every day, every advancement could be transformational for that family. I want to thank Janet, who reached out, who'd lost her granddaughter, Elizabeth. Now, Elizabeth was a real fighter. She raised over £100,000 before she died, and she left her body for research, demonstrating what individuals are doing on this fight, and therefore probing a question for the government, which is, it is your turn now to step in and meet these families and these communities with what they're already putting in. I also want to thank Sheila, who sadly lost both her sister Margaret as well as her father-in-law to pancreatic cancer, and mention Millie, the incredible young girl who died of leukemia when she was just 11 years old, not 18 months after being first diagnosed. But her mother, Lorraine, always reminds me to talk about Millie's life and what she brought while she was with us. She should have turned 16 last year, but she was the girl with the brightest smile who took on life and everything that it threw at her and was brave to the last. And we owe it in the memory of Millie and her mum's incredible work with their charity Millie Smiles to take the action today to do all we can to tackle this in the future. When I was in my late 20s, one of my best friends lost both her mother and her sister within a year, one to melanoma and the other to ovarian cancer. And the reality is that if they'd been living in America, at least for one of them, if not both, we would have had more time. And that's not good enough. I refuse to accept that. And today we can take steps to make sure that people like my friend don't have to be left literally with none of their family, and can have that precious time, however long that might be, because every day and every week and every birthday, it really counts. In conclusion, the Rare Cancers Bill represents a comprehensive approach to addressing the disparities faced by individuals with rare cancers. By revising the regulatory frameworks, promoting dedicated research and facilitating patient participation in clinical trials, this legislation has the potential to transform the landscape of rare cancer treatment in the UK. I am glad that this Labour government is supporting this bill as part of the development of the desperately needed National Cancer Plan, recognising that the provisions of this bill are a crucial step forward towards equity and excellence in cancer care for all patients, regardless of the rarity of their diagnosis. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
John Slinger.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West, for bringing forward his important bill, and honourable members across this House for their powerful and moving speeches, particularly those of my honourable friends, the members for Calder Valley, for Mitcham and Morden, and for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch, who showed that the love of a sibling or child persists forever and can be harnessed to bring about change. I'm speaking today because my constituent, Mr. Peter Relf, contacted me about his son, Stephen, who was training to be an RAF pilot when diagnosed with astrocytoma. He was just 19. Tragically, despite his cancer being described as low grade, and despite receiving treatment that prolonged his life, he died 6 years later, aged just 26. I cannot imagine the pain and the sense of loss felt by Stephen's family and friends, and my heart goes out to them and all who have faced the consequences of this cruel disease. Mr. Relf and his family have campaigned tirelessly since Stephen's death to address the baffling paradox that despite brain tumours killing more children and adults under 40 than any other cancer, and that they rob patients of more years of their lives than any other cancer too, only a fraction of the government's research funding into cancer is used for brain tumours. According to the charity Brain Tumour Research, just 1.37% of national spend. Stephen Relf's case is stark. A talented, hard-working and clearly impressive young man who died young and lost perhaps 50 years of life, 50 years of potential. A huge public petition and an article written by Stephen's sister Maria led in 2015 to the then new Petitions Committee of this House conducting its first inquiry. I challenge any honourable or right honourable member to read the report's conclusions from 2016, 9 years ago, and not conclude that, in general, so little has improved since then. We should be deeply concerned, and perhaps, as my honourable friend, the member for Mitcham and Morden, has indicated, the appropriate emotion should be stronger. We hear that the additional £40 million pledged by the last government, we hear of that, and how 28 million of this, according to reports, is yet to be released to scientists. After one of the relevant authorities, the National Institute for Health and Care Research, came to see us at the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Brain Tumours recently, my colleagues and the campaigners, patients and families present still could not fathom just why the money hadn't been spent in all those years. I am relatively new to this place, but I've been observing politics for a long time, and something about this issue doesn't fit, doesn't feel right. Something is profoundly wrong. Where there should be outrage, there appears to be relative indifference, not to death and suffering, of course, but to the need for radical changes to get money flowing. Where there should be urgency among the authorities, for people are after all dying, often young, there appears to be a degree of inertia. And where there should be action, we often get lost in the chilling snowstorm of bureaucracy. I am not impugning the decency, compassion or professionalism of officials, researchers or clinicians. They are, of course, committed to helping cure, treat and prevent cancer. But as with other examples of institutional failure, it does not take overt malice, just the absence of grip, of tenacity in the face of injustice, or of challenging the status quo, for good things not to happen, or even for bad and preventable outcomes to occur. I do not know why this doesn't seem to be happening. What reasons could there possibly be for the continuing paradox of the underfunding of rare cancer research? We must find out and overcome these reasons, these forces, or perhaps even vested interests, because the stakes couldn't be higher. Little has changed in treatment terms or treatment and survivability since the 1960s. Patients with brain tumours do not have time on their side, as has been mentioned by many honourable members, as most of those diagnosed sadly die within 5 years. The following statistics that I will read out from brain tumour research are stark, but before I read them I should point out that I am glad of the progress made on more common cancers, which have affected my family as they have every family. Brain tumours kill more children than leukemia. They kill more men under 70 than prostate cancer and more women under 35 than breast cancer. Incidences of and deaths from brain tumours are increasing. At the current rate of spending, it could take 100 years for brain cancer to catch up with developments in other diseases and to find a cure. That is why my honourable friend's bill is so needed, because it offers practical steps to get more funding into research to take on and defeat these cancers. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I know my ministerial colleagues want only the best for patients, so can I gently encourage them, if they haven't already done so, to ask this question of officials. Why is it that research into these cancers, which cause so much death and suffering among the young, which rob so many people of so many years of life, receiving so little funding? They should keep asking until they get a satisfactory answer. MPs should keep asking until we get a satisfactory answer. And we should work together, cross-party if possible, to overcome obstacles. And we should certainly, therefore, pass this bill. The pain, loss, concern and even anger must be channeled into urgent, substantive action. We owe it to the past, current and future victims of rare cancers and their families.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I also thank my honourable friend, the Member for Edinburgh South West, for bringing forward this bill. If, as we always say, politics is the language of priorities, then my honourable friend has got his priorities absolutely correct. And I'd also like to thank all those members who shared their experiences and their stories, some of them incredibly moving, and they really should be what inspires us to take all of this action that we're proposing today forward. I was struck by the fact that the Honourable Member for Wokingham and I have something in common, something we probably wouldn't want to have in common, in that we were both diagnosed with breast cancer in 2008. I have to say, my breast cancer was very strange breast cancer. And it always feels slightly strange talking about it because no one's ever heard of it. And it's not a rare cancer as such because it's a breast cancer, although there are some who argue it's actually a soft tissue sarcoma, but whatever, it was treated as a breast cancer. It's called a phyllodes tumour. And unlike other breast tumours, it doesn't go into the ducts, it actually goes into the connective tissue. So it presents very differently from other cancers, or quite differently from other cancers of the breast. And the treatment is also very different in that the only treatment that works is excision. Now, excision can be anything from a lumpectomy to a mastectomy. And the hope is that you get clear margins that mean you're going to be okay. But, and it's a big but, when a malignant phyllodes tumour is present, they can spread and they can be very difficult. In fact, they can be impossible to treat. And that's when it becomes a very, very different outcome. Now, the reason I mention it today is because it's not a rare cancer as such, but it can be very, very difficult to diagnose. It doesn't show up in a mammogram, for example, and there's no definitive explanation as to why they occur. There's some research going on just now, but it's not very conclusive as yet. There's a lot more work needs to happen, and because there are so few incidences of it, it is quite difficult to research. And the things we do know about it for certain are actually very, very random, or they seem to me to be very, very random. They tend to occur more often in the left breast. Why? I have no idea. And they usually occur when a patient is in their 40s. As I've said, they don't seem to respond to chemo or radiotherapy, and they're not thought to be genetic or hormonal. So the reason, as I say, that I mention it today is because it can be quite a lonely thing to have an unusual cancer. Because if you're trying to explain it to your family and friends that no, it didn't show up in a mammogram, and no, I'm not getting chemotherapy or radiotherapy, no, I don't know why it happened, and no, I hadn't heard of it either, you do begin to doubt yourself a little, and you begin to question what is actually going on. So for someone with a very rare cancer, where there isn't a background of research, where there isn't anything that you can read where no one can give you a pamphlet about it and tell you what's happening. It must be incredibly, incredibly difficult. Now, it seems to me that we should know more about cancer, full stop, and that we get to 2025 and we know some things about cancer, we know how to treat some cancers, but there are so many others that we really don't have the answer for. We need people to be diagnosed more quickly, which means that we have to have the research. We need people to have the best possible treatment, which means that we have to look at the drugs and find out what works and what doesn't work, and where a drug can be transferred from one thing to another successfully. And crucially, we have to know why it is that some people get cancer and others don't. So this bill will make a huge difference to the lives of some of the people we've heard about today. And of course, for some, as we know, it won't be soon enough. And it's our responsibility, every single one of us, to make change happen. And we have an opportunity today to take that step forward. And my honourable friend, the member for Mitcham and Morton, spoke about her sister Margaret, who I worked with for a time in the Labour Party. And I was reflecting while we were listening to other speeches about what she said today. And you know, promised I wouldn't do this. I think we all need to be angry. Yeah. I think we need to shout it from the rooftops, and we need to say, change begins today.
Yeah. Very powerful. Lee Ingham.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm really proud to share the benches with everyone today. The advocacy we've heard has been incredibly moving. My own constituents, I just want to name those that asked me to be here and speak today: Rosalind, Rob, Mark and Michelle. They are in support of this bill, as am I. Rare cancer patients face incredible challenges: delayed diagnoses, limited treatment options and a lack of research investment that often leaves them feeling forgotten. But this bill seeks to and will change that narrative. It's a call to action for greater investment, better access to clinical trials and a stronger commitment to research that will ultimately save lives. Barriers and bureaucracy must not stand in the way of innovation. That's why I support the measures in the bill that will call for a comprehensive review of how we approve treatments for rare cancers. The Honourable Member for Mitcham and Morden said that more powerfully than I ever could. This bill is about fairness, it's about dignity and it's about hope. It's clear that it's got significant support across this House, from us all, not just as politicians, but as people who understand the value of every life. I hope we all get to vote for it today.
Tracy Gilbert.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank everyone for their moving, passionate and powerful speeches today. And can I congratulate my honourable friend from Edinburgh South West for bringing forward this bill and the work that he has done with so many stakeholders. And I also commend him for sharing the story of his father-in-law, who I know will be sadly missed by him and his family. The story of my honourable friend's father-in-law has prompted a significant number of my constituents in Edinburgh North and Leith to share their stories in advocating for this bill. One particular story was from a constituent's friend who passed away at age 45 in November 2023. Their friend was diagnosed with 2 rare cancers and on each occasion was informed by their doctors that it was a cancer that they did not know how to treat. My constituent's friend tragically died, unable to understand how more wasn't known about the rare cancers, despite the large number of money that's been put into research and the wins that have been achieved in cancer care and treatment by scientists and medics over the last few decades. Madam Deputy Speaker, in Edinburgh, many cancer patients are treated at the Edinburgh Cancer Research Centre at the Western General Hospital, which borders my Edinburgh North and Leith constituency. Established in 2022, the Cancer Research UK Scotland Centre brings together the very best in cancer research from Edinburgh and Glasgow, working with over 80 different teams. The centre has established processes and access to 2 of the largest cancer treatment centres in Scotland, making trials and research more efficient. The centre has mesothelioma, a rare cancer that affects the lining of the lungs, abdomen or heart, as one of its 6 research themes. I'm keen to hear from the member of the engagement that has happened between him and the University of Edinburgh and the Edinburgh Cancer Research Centre on this bill. Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill crosses devolved and reserved areas. I believe in the pooling and sharing of resources. In the same way that profit shouldn't be a barrier to research, neither should a border at Gretna. I'm keen to hear from the member, or indeed the Minister, about any discussions that have taken place with Scotland and other devolved ministers to ensure we work across the UK, utilising the research talent of the University of Edinburgh and others across the UK, and have a joined-up approach to making breakthroughs on the treatment of care and rare cancers. In particular, I'm keen to know if there has been dialogue with Scotland and other devolved ministers on clauses 2 and 3 of the bill, and if devolved ministers have given any undertakings to replicate these proposals. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I know this bill will make a difference to our constituents, and I'm delighted to be able to speak in support of it today. My own mum, Violet, died 2 decades ago, within 6 weeks of her cancer being diagnosed. And I hope that this bill will give hope and time to every family impacted with a cancer diagnosis.
Julia Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to begin by thanking my honourable friend from Edinburgh South West for moving this rare cancers bill. Many of my constituents in Broxtowe have shared with me their experiences, their families' experiences and their friends' experiences with rare cancers. Rare cancers make up almost half of cancer diagnosis, so this rare cancer bill is very much welcomed. One of my constituents wrote to me recently about their 7-year-old son who was diagnosed with medulloblastoma, a rare form of brain cancer. Sadly, their son did not survive his cancer, despite the 75% survival rate. Medulloblastoma exists on a spectrum of high to low risk, further complicating the ability to predict the outcome of treatment. I'm here today representing this child, their family, and other families affected by rare cancers. I therefore welcome the increase in research funding and support of early detection and diagnosis. I welcome the introduction of this rare cancer bill and wholeheartedly support it.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'll be brief because I understand we're at the end of the debate, but I do want to rise in support of this bill and pay tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West, for bringing forward this legislation and for the dignified and collegiate manner in which he's gone about that. There will be now up to 95 people in Paisley and Renfrewshire South who are facing a less survivable cancer. That's 95 people who will wait longer for a diagnosis, who will face a postcode lottery for accessing specialist treatment, and who will be left asking why there are so few treatment options available. The truth is that rare cancers do not receive the research, attention or funding that they need, and this bill takes decisive action to change that. It will introduce measures that will break down systemic barriers preventing research and innovation in rare cancers. These are not abstract policy changes, they're life-saving reforms that mean that patients with rare cancers will have greater access to clinical trials, researchers will have better tools to study the diseases, and pharmaceutical companies will be given stronger investments to invest in treatments that could transform lives. Behind every rare cancer diagnosis is a person fighting for their future, a family searching for answers, and healthcare professionals looking for better treatment options. We cannot allow those individuals to be left behind simply because their condition is considered rare. Today we have the opportunity to change that. By supporting this bill, we send a clear message that no cancer is too rare to matter and no patient should be forgotten. I'm very proud to support it, and I thank my honourable friend for bringing forward the legislation.
I now call the Shadow Health Secretary, Ed Alban.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I start by extending to the Honourable Lady, the member for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch and her family my sincere condolences on the passing of her father. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is an important bill, and I often say to constituents, if you wish to see the House of Commons at its best, tune in and watch on a Friday. And I say that again today, having heard this debate. Now, it is rare for a Shadow Secretary of State to take to the front bench on a Friday private member's bill, but the debate we have heard today has reinforced what was my clear determination that I wish to be here this Friday. I want to, as the honourable gentleman, my honourable friend, I like to call him the member for Bootle, says this is a bill of hope. And I want to pay tribute to the honourable gentleman, the member for Edinburgh South West, for his clear and compelling articulation of the case for this bill, but also for being willing to share something so personal as the loss of his father-in-law and his family's circumstances, which he has set out with great dignity, I have to say. Now, the quality of the debate means it's always a little invidious to try to pick out any particular contributions, but I'm afraid I can't quite resist doing so. I have to pick up on the contribution of the Honourable Lady, the member for Mitcham and Morden. Now, when I was a minister, although not on this subject, but on many others relating to health, we often worked with each other, we often spoke with each other, and the passion, determination and energy for change and for something better that comes across in everything she does, I think, builds on the fact that this is a bill for hope, and I pay tribute to her for her work and her dedication. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, I've been a member of this House for 10 years, a minister before the election, for 6 of those, and 2.5 of those were spent as a minister in the Department of Health during those times that were so challenging for everyone of the pandemic. But I have to say, I have rarely heard a speech so powerful, so moving, and which held the House so completely as that of the honourable gentleman, the member for Calder Valley. And although I didn't know his brother, I would venture to suggest, I suspect he would have been deeply, deeply proud of him today. Madam Deputy Speaker, as we've heard, rare in this context is often really a misnomer, because although incidences of individual cancers are rare, collectively they are sadly all too prevalent. And we've heard from honourable members that around 55% of all cancer deaths are down to rare cancers, or so-called rare cancers. And the breadth of those rare cancers is huge. Blood cancers, cancers of female reproductive organs, head and neck cancers, pancreatic cancer, brain cancer, and glioblastoma, as the Honourable Lady has spoken about. And of course, importantly, children's and young people's cancers, as I think the Honourable Lady, Member for Easham and Walton, spoke about. Now, we've all seen the amazing work done by powerful campaigners on these issues and the huge array of charities campaigning in this space. Cancer 52, the Brain Tumour Charity, Tessa Jowell, Brain Cancer Mission, Leukemia UK, Pancreatic Cancer UK, and a whole range of other dedicated and amazing institutions. They, alongside campaigners, do a fantastic job. Now, I, like other members, and I think the Honourable Lady Member for Birmingham Erdington may well have done the same, I met with Pancreatic Cancer UK recently to hear about their work, initially to discuss the issues of the drug PERT shortages and the urgent need for some sort of solution to resolve this, but also to have the opportunity to talk with them more broadly about pancreatic cancer and rare cancers. And they highlighted to me issues specific to pancreatic cancer, which I suspect are reflected of many of the rare cancers. The challenge of diagnosis, the challenges posed by late diagnosis, the reliance on often only a single or very small number of therapeutics with complex supply chains, and the challenges of clinical trials, when sadly, as in the case of pancreatic cancer, so few, even when they are able to enlist on those trials, survive long enough to be able to provide the data that will make a real difference. Now, this bill helps address this. Because each cancer, rare cancer, is different, each, of course, needs focused research and treatment. And because, as the Honourable Member for Bootle set out very clearly, of the orphan drugs regime for rare cancers. Yes, there are incentives. There is, under the 2021 regulations, the ability to incentivise pharmaceutical companies who may not be inclined to invest in research into areas where only a few, compared to the large numbers of other cancers, may benefit. That regime seeks to give market exclusivity rights for 10 years, helping reduce the costs of market authorisations. But I think we do have to ask the question, as this bill does, is it actually doing the job that it needs to do to genuinely incentivise those companies to invest in the research in this space? And the Honourable Lady from Mitcham and Morden touched on the NHS repurposing project. That is a very practical way that while we wait for that research, that specialist research to come through, we can still do something if we make that work effectively. Now, the Honourable Gentleman's bill, I believe, goes a long way to addressing these. The review of the orphan drugs regime, I think, is hugely important, and particularly the international angle, and I welcome all of this and all of the provisions in his bill, particularly the specialist registry and the sharing of information to get more people into trials. While there are, of course, always with any bill, some things that I believe would benefit from further explanation, this is what committee stage is for. So I'm very happy to set out as Shadow Secretary of State that he has our support for the passage of this bill through its second reading and into committee. There is a time to act often in this place and in life, and I believe this is it. We have huge potential in this country and huge talent. Let us help focus that on saving more lives and giving more precious time to more people. I am very pleased and proud to offer my support to the Honourable Gentleman for the passage of his bill.
I now call the Minister, Ashley Dalton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Firstly, let me say how sorry I was to hear my honourable friend, the member of Edinburgh South West, had recently lost his father-in-law to glioblastoma. And I congratulate him for introducing this legislation less than a year following his election, and I know his wife and children will be immensely proud to see him in the chamber today. I know he has the full support of many charities, for Pancreatic Cancer UK, the Brain Tumour Charity and Cancer Research UK, as well as people up and down the country who have written to their MP urging them to join this debate and vote for this bill. And I also want to pay tribute to all of those honourable and right honourable members who have lost loved ones and remembered them so powerfully today. Thank you for the courage that you have shown in sharing your stories today. And particularly, I don't think there was anybody in this chamber or watching, either from the gallery or beyond, that could fail to have been moved by the really powerful stories from my honourable friends, the members for Calder Valley, Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch. And of course, my honourable friend, the member for Mitcham and Morden, to whom I give particular thanks, as she has campaigned tirelessly on the issue of glioblastoma following the untimely loss of her sister, Margaret. I'd also like to pay tribute to those that remembered their constituents, and I'm delighted to say that I will be meeting very soon with the member, my honourable friend, the member for Hyndburn, with Lorraine, to discuss Millie's Smiles. And I wanted to take the opportunity to add my memories of Joe Chilcott, the son of my friends Tim and Verity, and sister to Ellie, who was diagnosed aged 10 with a brain tumour. And it was heartbreaking to lose him when he was just 18. I thank all the honourable members who've spoken in this place today, and I will seek to address many of the issues as possible raised. And so many stories. And so many stories. And I'd like to recognise those that were mentioned in those stories, that were remembered, and those in the gallery, and the many more watching at home that are here willing this bill to succeed. On behalf of the government, it is my great pleasure to pledge our support to this bill. We are undertaking a fundamental reform of the NHS, and people living with rare cancers must be at the heart of this change. Rare cancer patients deserve better, and this bill gives them something which we've heard spoken about across the House today: hope, new hope. So I'd like to begin my remarks on what this bill will do and why we are supporting it, and our policy on rare cancers more generally. Madam Deputy Speaker, clinical research is one of the most important ways in which we can improve healthcare, and by identifying the best way to prevent, diagnose and treat cancer. The bill acts to encourage the placement of clinical trials for rare cancer in England by ensuring the patient population can easily be contacted by researchers, streamlining the recruitment process. And it will also ensure a government review of regulations relevant to orphan drug designation to ensure these regulations are continuing to deliver for patients. Innovations in this bill will complement the radical actions we are developing through the 10-year health plan and the National Cancer Plan to fix the NHS, on which I will expand later. Research is a key part of this effort, and that's why the Department of Health and Social Care, through the National Institute for Health and Care Research, invests over £1.6 billion per year in health research. And in 23-24, the NIHR invested £133 million on cancer research. And as we've heard today, rare brain cancers and rare cancers such as glioblastoma have a devastating impact on people and their loved ones. And it's why in September 2024, the NIHR announced a new package of research funding opportunities for brain cancer research and established a new National Brain Tumour Research Consortium in December, bringing together researchers from a wide range of different disciplines. And that's in parallel to a dedicated funding call of research into wraparound care, the rehabilitation and quality of life for patients with brain tumours. We remain committed, Madam Deputy Speaker, to accelerating new breakthroughs in high-quality research to drive improvement in diagnosis, management and treatment of brain and other rare cancers for better survival rates and patient outcome. It has been mentioned about the £40 million promise for brain tumours and how that has been spent. That was asked for by the Honourable Members for Esher and Walton and Mitcham and Morden, among others. And in the 5 years from 2018 to 2019, the NIHR has invested £11.3 million directly in brain cancer, with a further 31.5 to enable brain tumour research. That's 227 studies involving 8,500 people. The commitment remains in place, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I confirm that there is actually no upper limit on that funding, and we are exploring additional research policy options to encourage more clinical trials in early phase research and the development of medical devices and diagnostics. We've also talked a lot about other rare cancers, including lobular breast cancer, and we are supporting research on lobular breast cancer through the research infrastructure, including biomedical research centres. And we would welcome further funding applications for research on all conditions, including lobular breast cancer. And we are continuing to look at whether abbreviated forms of breast magnetic resonance imaging, so fast MRI, can detect breast cancers that are missed by screening through mammography, such as lobular breast cancer, such as the other types of breast cancer that have been mentioned today. And we are also supporting the opening of 171 studies on blood cancer, providing an online registry called Be Part of Research, which allows users to search for studies relevant to them and to participate. Clinical trials, you see, are a crucial part of cancer research, and they provide patients with early access to groundbreaking, possibly life-changing treatments. The measures in this bill strongly align with our commitment to this and aim to streamline clinical trial recruitment processes. My honourable friend, the member for Mitcham and Morden, spoke passionately about how long it is taking for Trust to negotiate contracts. We recognise this is an issue and we are beginning to make progress. The NHS commercial contracting has been standardised and the NCVR has reduced study set-up times by 36%, from 305 days to 194 days in the first 12 months analysis, and we continue on that work. Member from Wokingham and also the member from Bootle asked about how we're working across borders, and we are taking forward the most significant reform of UK clinical trial regulations in over 20 years, whilst maintaining robust protection and safeguarding for clinical trial participants. The MHRA already authorises cross-border clinical trials, including those conducted in the EU, and that includes a UK-based trial site. And the Be Part of Research programme uses information from national and international sources. My honourable friend from Mitcham and Morden spoke so passionately, and we've all commented on her passion and anger, and I appreciate her frustration. I share her desire for radical action, and I think we can all agree that the government's announcement yesterday on scrapping NHS England demonstrates our willingness to be bold, to take risks and to do things differently. There are several other things that people raise, and I will come back to all honourable members with some more detailed information that they did raise. But we don't have the time to do that today. But what I did want to talk about, and has been raised a number of times, is the National Cancer Plan. It's really important to fill our goal of transforming cancer care, and we will not just cherry pick the most common cancers. We need a rising tide that will lift all ships. And I say to the House, I cannot overstate, as a person who is living with an incurable cancer myself, how deeply I feel the honour and the responsibility of being asked to drive our work in creating the National Cancer Plan. It is my absolute honour. Excuse me. But while we take those strides to fix cancer services, I am under no illusion that the government or I hold all of the answers. So, honourable members, it is my plea for you to work with us and share your expertise. Please visit the Shaping National Cancer Plan on the Department's website and contribute evidence. The government is committed to make a real difference for patients with rare cancers. For those affected by this devastating disease, every discovery, every treatment, every moment matters. We will do all we can to facilitate the passage of this bill here and in the other place. Thank you.
Yeah. With the leave of the House, I call Dr. Scott Arthur to wind up.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With the leave of the House, I would just like to thank a few people. First and foremost, of course, the Minister for her speech. I met her yesterday and she was filled with passion and energy for this subject, genuine passion and energy and also excitement, and it's great to see her come here today to use her power to support this bill, and let's hope that that's what happens. So thank you. And I would also like to thank the Shadow Secretary of State. Before this debate, people told me he was respected across the House, and I think he's shown why, so thank you. And I must also thank the member for Crawley. I think people in the gallery won't know this, but he's worked really effectively right through this debate to ensure all of the people who wanted to speak could speak. So thank you to him. Thank you. And I have to thank the whips and the Speaker's Office for managing this sensitively, because it has been quite a difficult subject, so thank you. And I have to thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, because it was you that pulled my ping pong ball from the goldfish bowl. So thank you. It was very skillfully done. Very skillfully done. And I do wish I had time to thank everybody who spoke in the debate, but sadly I don't. But you have my thanks and you have my respect. And I think you've done a great job of thanking each other as this debate has proceeded. So thank you all. And I will be watching the debate again over the weekend, because it's been quite incredible and it's been quite moving. I have to thank our colleagues from Department of Health and Social Care who are in the box. They've been fantastic, and without them this bill would not have happened. There's been a few what I called privately Sir Humphrey moments, but they have been absolutely fantastic, and I was very clear on that yesterday when I met the Minister. I have to thank the charities who backed the bill, and they did not just back it, they helped get it to where it is. It wasn't just them backing a finished product, they influenced and shaped it, and I think that's why so many people are here supporting it. I have to thank the staff in the Public Bill Office, of course, for their patience and so much more. And I have to thank the staff in my office. I think Noel and Saul are here today, but it's a team effort back in Edinburgh with Lucy, Salim, Xavier, Evie and Hannah. So they deserve it. Thank you. So I think in all the contributions today, I think I have evidence that people who face a rare cancer diagnosis do face a great injustice, because their chances are just so much more slimmer and they face so much uncertainty. But we've shown, I think, that we want change on this subject. And we're harnessing that anger, and we're not just being angry, we're using that to get even, and I think that's really important. And quite often here in this room, we talk, but often there's no action. But I think what today, we've talked, we've agreed, and there's going to be action, hopefully. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Yeah. Most definitely Parliament at its best. Now the question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Yeah. I'll give the front bench a moment or two to swap over. Can leave quietly and swiftly. Members could be seated. We can progress. Minister.
Free school meals.